Teach about salvation, which in my opinion is very, very clear. Repent, turn away from your sins, and turn your whole heart to God. And although Christianity today, operating mostly under Pauline theology, would say, if you want to be forgiven of your sins, just confess Jesus and believe in his death and resurrection, and you're forgiven. And yet Jesus said, if you do not forgive your brother his trespasses, your heavenly Father will not forgive yours. Judge and you will be judged. Forgive and you will be forgiven.
Historical Christianity.
No, we don't believe that.
If you just confess Jesus,
Believe that.
you're forgiven.
A lot of heretics believe that.
Well, it is Romans 10:9. It's just it's no less than
really
that.
quick,
It's
what's
just
Romans
much more than
10:9?
that. So I'm a Reformed Baptist, so I would definitely say that is exactly what we were describing when we would say that's an anti-lordship gospel. That you just need to confess Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and then you have your ticket punched. That is not what, in the historic Reformed perspective that I hold to, that would be a false profession.
Bum, 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 boom.
A lot of things people have issues with in the Bible in particular come from the literal interpretations versus symbolic or metaphorical or mythological. People look at a lot of these stories and say, okay, they seem really harsh, while somehow it's funny because we'll give something like the Norse mythos a total pass. Nobody sits and goes, well, Odin was cruel or whatever, so therefore I can't enjoy some of those, Nordic myths. As I understand, it's just a story in some ways meant to be psychologically useful in helping people to make sense of and act in the world. Do you see the literal interpretation as being sort of a problem with religion and why people have difficulty with the Bible?
Well, I think I always kind of joke and say it's not totally a joke, but I always tell people like there is no literal interpretation, in the sense that the reason why these stories are being told is because they have meaning. It's like they were chosen out of an indefinite amount of things that happened or didn't happen or whatever, and they were chosen and put there because they have a specific meaning, a specific function, a specific piece of the puzzle in a bigger, let's say, full pattern of being. And so I think that's how you have to see it. I always tell people, like, I think a lot of things in the old, even in the Old Testament, I think a lot of the things happened, but I don't think they happened in the way that like I drank my coffee this morning. It's like there are different levels of how events can happen. And I think that especially as time goes by, the events get compressed into more and more compressed categories so that they can survive the centuries and the millennia. It's like if I told a story about, how I got in my, whatever year Buick and drank a cup of latte coffee, it's like that has a very, very short period of time for it to be an understandable story. But if I just say I got into a vehicle and drank my beverage, it's like that compresses the categories, and you can do that almost like on a cosmic scale. And so some images become typed, like the tree or the snake or the mountain or the like the rod, or there's all these images that kind of compress a whole bunch of information into one single image. And so in that sense, it's like, I don't ask myself, like, I'm not even that bothered or like preoccupied with what happened, in what way did it happen. All I know is I have these stories, and these stories were handed to me by, thousands of years of people who took these stories as being the basis of their civilization. And so I take them that way, and I look at them that way, and then I say, I'm going to be generous to these stories, first of all. It's like, this is the legacy of my ancestors. I'm going to look at them with generosity first, and not with this kind of constant suspicion people have been doing. It's like, it's like there's this attitude of constant suspicion that everything that exists is there to trick you or to control you or to manipulate you. And it's like, man, my goodness, like, how do you live in that world? You know, it's a really oppressive world. Maybe some of those are, but let's start by looking at them with a generous approach. And when you do that, like, the stories kind of open up in a way that you didn't expect, and you start to see patterns, and you realize that a lot of the stories, especially in the Old Testament, they're not there to a lot of them are not there to give you examples of how to act. They're there to show how the world works, like how the patterns of existence come together. And so there's no characters in the Bible that are just good, except maybe for Christ. Like all the characters.
That is so true. So relevant when you're reading the Old Testament and you have all these questions about, like, well, why did God do that? Why did the Israelites do that? And why did they do this? And why did God tell them to do this and that? It's like, because they're evil. That's the whole point. We are a fallen people. We live in a fallen state, so to speak. But
characters in the Bible have a light and a dark side. It's like, you know, like, if you think of any character, like Abraham definitely has a dark side. Like, he lied about his wife, and he does shady things. Like, everybody in the Bible has a dark side. So you have to just look at it and then try to take those characters and see how they relate to each other. And then slowly you just see, like, oh my goodness, this has more than what I was told. Like, if I look at it in terms of a story, it's way more powerful.
Why do you think it is that, in particular with Christianity, that it's been interpreted in a more literal fashion? I mean, I don't know if the people in Scandinavia really thought of, Thor and Odin as being people that somebody met, 10 generations ago and existed and had those kind of arguments, or if they really thought of it as more purely a mythological thing and were aware of that. Christianity seems to be much more, I can see how people would get it concerned and bogged down in whether or not these are literal stories.
But I think we have to be able to differentiate Christianity with the 19th century. It's like, Christianity is 2,000 years. If you read the Church Fathers, if you read St. Gregory of Nyssa, who talks about the Old Testament stories, he talks about how they're a discussion about the soul and the struggle and the virtues of the soul and the struggles of the person against his passions. And so it's like, he doesn't care whether they're happened or not. Like, he probably does think they happened, but that's not the focus of his interpretation. Like, the focus, why would you tell stories? Why would you care about these stories if all they were things that happened? Like, who cares about that? They're really something else. And so what happened in the West is that as the kind of the let's say the scientific mind grew after the Renaissance, with the scientific revolution and then the Enlightenment, it's as if Christians felt the need to constantly defend it's like they got tricked into thinking that what their tradition was about and what the Bible was about, it was about the same thing that these scientists are talking about. And so they're trying to keep those two on the same par and trying to show, like, crazy stuff. Like, in the 19th century, Christians were saying just insane things about like trying to interpret the Old Testament text and trying to historically, show that this person at that date and trying to date it precisely. And it's like, man, this is not helpful. It's not helpful for anybody.
Right.
And so when that broke finally, let's say in the 19th century, it was, and also the Enlightenment kind of was trying to break it. When it broke, it was like all of a sudden there was just this wave of derision towards religious stories and how silly and superstitious they are and how they're not scientifically accurate. And it's like, they never were meant to be scientifically accurate. Right. And sadly, we have in North America especially, we have this whole group of evangelicals that still think they still live in the 19th century, and they still continue to like defend like tooth and nail their, like 6-day creation.
Right.
But it's like, dude, in the 2nd century, Origen was already telling you, it's like, you can't have grass before the sun. in terms of just mechanical reality. It's like, this is 2nd century stuff, people. It's like they already knew, like Origen was saying the same thing. It's like they knew that it was talking about reality in a different way, in a very powerful way. That story in Genesis, it's like, dude, the whole world is contained in that story. When I say the whole world, it's like the whole way in which we exist in reality is contained in that story. But it's definitely not a scientific description of how things happen.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a shame that people still, do pull those more literal interpretations or stick to that with their, all guns a-blazing with it. Because if you look, listening to somebody like Jordan sit down and discuss Genesis, I went, oh my God, like I had this ridiculous childish interpretation of this before, and I was attacking it on the basis of it being some, exact literal thing that needed to be broken down scientifically, which was silly, because again, I wouldn't do that if you told me the origin story out of Norse mythology or pretty much most other religions. I would never sit there and go, well, did that really occur? It's the usefulness of the story and the psychological level of it and the mythical manner is just goes so far well beyond that, and it's unfortunate that it's been kind of maligned or misinterpreted.
One of the difficulties, and it's a real difficulty, is especially today, because of how the people think today, is that there is in the Bible, especially in the Bible, there is a historical drive. That is, there is a sense into which the cosmic truth, let's say the transcendent truth, will manifest themselves in the world. That is, that it's not these opposed things, like that you have these stories that are patterns, let's say, that are kind of transcendent patterns, then you have reality and they're separate and they just kind of run their course. It's like, no, the biblical way of discussing the world is that let's say the manifest world is a manifestation of those transcendent principles. And so if you look at the world, you will find the patterns manifesting themselves. And so some of the stories, that's what they're showing, but they're not doing it in a scientific way. Like I said, they're doing it by compressing these stories and sometimes describing things which are very difficult to describe in terms of a phenomenon, but using words that connect to higher meaning and doing it at the same time. So it's like, for example, for Christian, it is important that Christ, the historical figure of Christ, was a historical figure. But it doesn't mean that the stories that are told in the gospel are told in a kind of forensic, how someone would describe a crime scene to a policeman would describe a crime scene. Obviously not, because there are contradictions between the different gospels, and the people who put the gospels together knew there were contradictions, and they didn't resolve them. They just left them there. Like there are things that, the same event, like things seem to happen differently. And it's like, because the point isn't to be accurate in describing an event, but to describe an event in a manner that shows how it connects to those higher principles. And to do that, you have to condense them, because that's what it means. Like that's what it means for the higher principles to appear in the world, is that they bring things together. Like they clump phenomena into a narrative, like I told you. Like that's the idea of the logos. Like the logos takes all this indefinite field of phenomena. Like you look around the world, you look around you, there's a million things that you could look at. Like there's an indefinite amount of them, but your experience tells you that's a tree. It's not a million leaves and 100,000 branches. It's a tree. It's one thing. But it's not obvious that it is one thing. There's something in our consciousness which pulls it together, and that's the same process which pulls these stories together in the Bible.
Most deaf.
One of the problems I run into when talking to people about symbolism is the whole problem of the literal versus metaphor idea. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but I think I want to dive into that problem and show you guys that, in fact, it isn't very much of a problem once you realize that there is no such thing as literal. This is Jonathan Pageau. Welcome to the symbolic world. Now, of course, I already hear a bunch of people screaming. No, he's saying that that the Bible didn't happen, that that everything is just a metaphor. No, exactly. I'm trying to break that duality. I'm really trying to destroy it, because it is really not useful in understanding how meaning occurs and how things manifest themselves. Now, when I say that there's no such thing as literal, what I mean by literal is this strange, pervasive idea that is still there in the West, it seems, that there is such a thing as a direct description of something, that there is such a thing as a description of something which is not bound up in meaning, and which is not bound up in narrative or an image, that it is somehow a meaningless description, that there is no it's not it's not already imbibed in meaning. And you get that all the time. And when you talk to people, they ask you, especially in terms of a story, in terms of the Bible, especially, people will argue over whether or not the description in the Bible are literal. Now, to be honest with you, at this point in my life, at this point in my understanding, I don't see what that even means. I can understand in the way that people talk about it what it is they seem to inferring, that it is somehow a neutral description of reality that is not that doesn't already have value or meaning laid in it. But I don't understand how that is possible, because when you describe something, no matter what it is you describe, you have to describe it. You have to have a purpose to describe it. You need a frame in order to talk about something, because like I've told you a million times, like I keep repeating, it's that reality is too big. There are too many details. If I describe a series of events, I will do it with a purpose, to make you understand something, I have to focus my attention on something, because around the event that I'm describing, there are a million other events going on that I'm not describing. And the question is, why am I describing these events and not describing these other events? Now, already that harms the problem of this notion of literal, because if I am not talking about the fact that this person, if I'm telling a story about something and I'm not talking about, the folds in their shirt, or I'm not talking about, the fact that they cut themselves shaving in the morning, I'm not talking about those things because they're not relevant to what it is that I'm trying to get to. They're not part of the purpose for which I'm describing something. Now, depending on the purpose for which I'm describing something, I will use different types of language to describe it. And the idea that somehow accuracy in this kind of scientific sense, that somehow accuracy is always desirable, is of course completely wrong. It is completely absurd, because accuracy also can fall into an indefinite amount of detail. If let's say that I am describing a fight and I want you to understand what happened. Now, I could use a language that is extremely accurate. I could say something like, the guy put his left foot in front of his front foot, and then the other person's right hand came at this speed towards his face, and he slightly flinched. When the fist hit his face, he displaced so many hairs and displaced so many pores, and then so many tissues in his cheek were disturbed, and then his head moved 3 centimeters to the left, and then it moved 4 centimeters backwards, and I can go on and on and on, and I could describe extremely accurately the event. But as I'm describing it accurately, I'm not getting to the purpose that I'm describing the event for, that I'm describing this event to you for. Now, I could say something like, the guy got smashed, he got his ass got whooped. I could use all this hyperbolic language in order to help you understand what happened in the fight. And in the end, my hyperbolic language, the fact that I'll use exaggerations, that I'll use figures of speech, that I'll use all these different ways of talking about reality, will end up being truer to the purpose that I'm using to describe the event than if I was accurate in describing it. Now, that's extremely important to understand, especially if we're looking at
That's so true. You miss so much. You wouldn't want your fight announcer to be able to you'd have no desire for the announcer of a fight to describe the speed, the exact speed of the fist and how many pores, like skin cells, got impacted by the fist, how many inches the head went back. That would mean nothing to you. It wouldn't even be clear who was winning if he did that, right? But if you say, he knocked the hell out of him, that is a much more, maybe not accurate, but that's a more proper way of describing a fight for a fight announcer. So, even if you decide to describe things scientifically, you're still using language, which itself is inherently metaphorical. So there really is no way to escape this problem of literalism. There is no literal meaning, not in the way we normally think of the word literal, which, by the way, technically just means close to the text.
Stories in the Bible. There are ways, each story in the Bible, each book in the Bible has different ways of describing things which are based on the purpose that they are describing them for. And so there are different styles, different ways. There are different analogies which can be used in order to help you understand the reason for which I am describing the text. And so this very idea that somehow you can get to this literal description of reality is extremely problematic, and it's not useful. It's better to rather understand the purpose that a story is being told. Even a scientific theory is never literal in the sense of a neutral description of reality. Mm-hmm. When you do a scientific experiment, you have to frame that scientific experiment extremely narrowly because, like I said, there are too many details. And so if my purpose in a scientific experiment is to prove something about water, I will not give you descriptions of trees or descriptions of rocks. No, I will talk about the thing that I'm trying to describe. And so that frame will be extremely narrow, and I will.
All right, that's an important point, right? Because then you might think like, well, of course you're not going to describe trees or rocks or anything else when you're doing any sort of science. Like if you're studying, I don't know, the chemical or the atomic structure of water. But you're starting by building a frame around it, by excluding all the other sort of multiplicitous details. So the place that you start is not the science. The place that you start is some sort of meaning making, some sort of map before you can even start to do the science. And if you didn't have the capability to create this frame or this structure and to choose with your sort of sense of what is good, what is proper, what is right, what advances knowledge versus confuses, then you couldn't do anything which we consider to be science. So science, there's this like misconception that it is the most literal thing. It's the most fundamental like basis of reality, or some people would even see it as like the top truth, like the most true. But it's far from that. It's not foundational to anything. Your sense of direction, your sense of meaning and meaning making is much more foundational than any sort of scientific pursuit, because without it, you couldn't do any sort of scientific pursuit, not even remotely. So that's what we're talking about here. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Go ahead and join that Discord if you feel like arguing with me or chatting it up, or have anything to add or subtract or take away from this thing. We're talking about whether anything literal exists. I'm going to say no. Literal in the way that we typically use it does not mean anything.
Use a certain type of language, quantifiable language, in order to describe the phenomena that I'm explaining to you. And the purpose is so that you can understand the mechanistic causes that bring it about, and so that maybe you can reproduce it mechanistically. But when we're describing an event, that's not always the reason why we're describing it. Like I said, to using figures of speech can somehow sometimes be more effective and more powerful than using just, this kind of quantifiable language. Now, if I use figures of speech or if I use analogies to describe something, does it mean that I'm not describing an event? Of course not. Of course, I can still be describing an event despite the fact that I'm using different types of ways of explaining it. Now, the stretch that I'm asking you guys to make is very important. The Christian way of describing reality is that the world is made by logos. The world is made by meaning and purpose and all of this. And so,
first of all, pause, because this is a beautiful icon here. Just gorgeous. But that's a really important point. That is the point. That is probably the most fundamental Christian point, is that the world is ordered towards meaning, towards logos, towards some end, which is good, right? And fundamentally, it's rational. And the idea that the universe is rationally constructed is the whole reason we can even do science. The whole reason we can trust our reason at all. It's because we expect it to be baked in to the sort of order of the universe. And after doing that experiment for a couple hundred years, Enlightenment years, we now know that there are these fundamental laws, this sort of like order and reason baked into the universe. But we only ever started to do that because we expected it. Because we wanted to, we were told, it was revealed to us that the universe was ordered and created by a mind, by a logos. So here we are. And now we just take it for granted and we say, oh, well, we figured everything out so we can ditch the religion part because that's useless now. But that was the meaning-making thing to begin with, and it still does make meaning. So it makes no sense to throw it out when all we did was prove that it was right. Okay, keep going. And definitely, I'm saying inflammatory things, so I'm trying to get someone to respond to me as well. But fair enough.
The very cosmology in which Christianity exists excludes the idea that there could be some kind of neutral reality that exists at the bottom somehow and that is not informed by meaning, by logos. The Bible itself describes the creation process as a process which is full of meaning and purpose. And so I don't understand how, despite that, people can somehow still have this weird idea of this neutral reality which exists underneath. The world of Christianity is a meeting of heaven and earth. And so it's a meeting of patterns, logos, meaning, purpose, and this potentiality which is there at the bottom. People don't like the word potentiality. You can use another word. St. Maximus talks about logos and tropos. That is this notion of purpose and meaning, and then the particularities of something. Those two have to join together.
And we talked about that yesterday, but that is the story of the Bible. And if you think about what the crux of at least the Christian Bible is, it's Jesus, the Son of God, God made man, turned into our brother. That is the very meeting point of this logos and tropos, the sort of unified meaning, the purpose of everything, God's will, God's divine mind, heaven, the kingdom of heaven, something like that. And tropos, this like just multiplicitousness, everything like reduced down to its parts, which is what people typically mean by like literal or scientific. But what the Bible tells us is that this whole thing is structured in this system as a hierarchy, that there is a moving upwards towards meaning. And that's what we want to get rid of now in our modern culture. There's sort of an implicit nihilism baked into like super scientism, that everything can be described by breaking it down to its most fundamental parts. I don't think anything can be described. I think actually that just tears apart all meaning, all words. If your desire is to break everything down into its like parts which have potentially no meaning, even though of course they don't, because you still use words and senses to describe those things, then what you're doing is removing purpose from the structure, from the hierarchy. You're removing the moving upwards. So we'll
And that is a little mini, you could call it a mini incarnation. It's not an incarnation in the same way that Christ is incarnated, but it is analogous to the incarnation in the sense that it's an invisible meaning and purpose which joins a kind of indefinite particularity, and that meeting together, that's where reality exists. That's where the world, where life, where all of these things are. And once that starts to break in our thinking, a lot of things become less problematic. A lot of things become less difficult to deal with, because one of the problems that we have is that people seem to want, let's say they're reading the story in Genesis, they're reading the description of creation. They want to get to this event. They somehow think that they can access this neutral event, which is behind the story. You don't have access to that. You can't get to it because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist on its own. The events that happen as they are described are this framing, this coming together of meaning and particulars. And so what we have is the story, especially when we're talking about something like the creation story or these ancient stories that have been around for thousands of years. What we have is the story. To try to somehow get to what is behind the story in this neutral manner is not the right way to go. People do.
It's not even possible. It's not even a possible way to go, because there is no neutrality behind the story. The story was created with purpose and meaning. So yeah, there just is no sort of neutral reality like people want to presume that there is, like fundamentalists and atheists who assume a fundamentalist position in order to argue against Christians. They presume that there is some sort of like totally neutral, like if I was there, I could see this happen because it's a brute objective fact version of the story. You have no ability to observe that. I guess even if it were there, you would have no ability. But I don't think it's even there.
Think that somehow, they tried through these archaeological methods or through these historical methods to get to what is behind the story in Genesis, but it's a futile trip. And it's especially futile if you think that once you get there, that what you're going to get from using archaeological methods or using these different new scientific ways of breaking down the text into all these different sources or whatever people come up with in the modern world, you're not going to get to something which is truer than what the story is offering you. And once you understand that, then like I said, a lot of things are going to free up in your mind and a lot of problems are going to go away. One of the examples that I like to use is the example of the prophecy that that Elijah is going to come before the Messiah. So there's this prophecy which in the Old Testament which said that Elijah is going to come back, is going to show himself before the Messiah. So when Christ is there, the disciples ask him about this prophecy, kind of ask him about what is going on, and Christ tells them that St. John the Baptist is the Elijah that was to come before the Messiah. And he says, if you're able to receive this, that is what happened. Now the question that is asked, if a question is posed, did Elijah come before the Messiah? The answer is yes, Elijah did come before the Messiah. That Elijah was John the Baptist. Now you see what I'm doing there. I'm not trying to get to this weird literal neutral reality behind it. I'm trying to show you how Christ can quite easily take this prophecy and show that it's actually a pattern of reality which is manifesting itself. And here is the manner in which it manifests itself. Elijah as this pattern, St. John the Baptist, those two come together. And so the answer to did Did Elijah manifest himself before the Messiah? The answer is yes. Now, that is the answer you give to, that I will give to everything. You know, did Adam and Eve fall in the garden? Yes. Did Adam and Eve eat the apple in the garden? Yes. All of these things, I have no problem saying that they are true and that they are the best description of that event and the best description of that reality. I'm not trying to get behind, in some weird scientific sense, behind the story to find out what it is that really happened. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what it is that you think you're going to get to. Yeah. That story is the story that was given to us.
And I think I'm guilty of that a lot too. It's the most fundamental, or I don't know, it's the waters we're swimming in as human beings in the 21st century, is to try to get to some sort of scientific neutral reality. People ask me all the time, like, was there a literal garden? And what I should say, and what I will say from here on out, is what Jonathan Pageau just said. Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true. All these things are true. They are the best possible, the truest possible explanation of what happened at that time. Or if time is even relevant in this meaning structure, right? But what they're asking me is not that. What they're asking me is for this weird, neutral, sort of like scientific, empirical factuality, like these facts that are behind the story. But the story is behind whatever facts there were. So if there were some sense in which there was not a talking snake or something like that, in like an empirical way, the story would still be more true. Does that make sense? The story is fundamental. The story is the foundational level of sort of interpretation of meaning for everything that follows from it.
Can you say this for every untrue bit of writing ever?
What's that? Oh, nice. Infamous. Welcome.
Couldn't you say that for every untrue bit of writing ever?
Yes, absolutely. And that would be still true. So like for Harry Potter, is there a guy with a lightning bolt scar on his head with, round glasses or whatever? No, but the truth of Harry Potter is foundational. It's more true than the actual Harry Potter being there. The fact that good triumphs over evil. The fact that you should be a nice person rather than a bad person or whatever it is.
Those are opinions. Those aren't truths.
Yes, they are truths. That's what. Well, okay.
Truths to you because that's your opinion.
No. These things are fundamentally true, is what I'm saying. Okay, fair enough. I mean, I know you can obviously rationally resist that truth, but I think
Well, that's all we care about when we're talking about rationality. Like, that's all we really care about when we're talking about logic. Like, what can you show to be true? Like, if you're just saying the story is true because I say so, like, then we're not getting anywhere. There's no point in having a discussion.
Well, because that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about literal versus metaphorical, and I'm making the point that literal does not exist, and that's what Jonathan Pageau is saying. So when you say
that literal things don't exist,
there's no real existence to the word literal. Actually, technically, the word etymologically means close to the text, which is interesting. It has the same root as literature, right? So,
right, but the word literal has literally been turned into a metaphor in recent years. It used to mean what it means, and now it could mean like an exaggeratory statement. Like changes, like whatever the etymology is,
exactly,
doesn't matter. But...
Exactly, words themselves are metaphors. So we have this sort of like base.
Well, no, they're similes to ideas. They're not metaphorical.
Okay, fine. There's similes. Simile is just kind of a different type of metaphor, but fair enough.
It's a direct metaphor. It's not a comparison.
Sure.
You could say something is like something else. That's a simile. If you're doing a metaphor, you're not saying it's like something else. You're just saying it. And then if you derive any meaning from that, that's fine.
Yeah, but so all words are like that. There is no literal words. There are no literal words.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. If you're just talking about the words themselves, but we're not talking about the words themselves. We're talking about the idea. We're just using the word.
So you agree with me that the idea is more true than whatever kind of description you give of the idea?
Yes, but the description of the idea is me confirming to you what I mean. It's not me, like, what you're saying is the ideas behind the words exist. I'm like, okay, true, fine, whatever.
Yes.
But if you're saying that the existence of the things that are said are true, That's not true.
The existence of the things that are said are true?
Like, for instance, if I say purple unicorn,
Yes.
the idea of a purple unicorn exists.
Yes.
Does a purple unicorn exist? No.
Well,
So
what do you
when
mean?
say the Bible is true, I agree with you that the idea of everything in the Bible exists. But is the Bible true? That's different.
How is that different?
Because the idea of the Bible exists. Whether or not it corresponds to reality is questionable.
But what do you mean by corresponds to reality? Do you mean scientifically, empirically?
Matches.
What's that?
Matches reality.
Yeah. So then the
Again,
Bible
separate
definitely
the
matches
idea
reality
existence
more
from
so
whether or
than
not the events
anything
happen.
else. But what do you mean? So what do you mean by matches reality?
Like that's exactly right. Like matches the things that exist. Like if I say purple unicorn, that thing doesn't exist, but the idea exists. I'm not corresponding the idea though. When I say pick up that mug, I didn't just communicate to you that I thought you could pick up a mug.
Yeah.
I communicated that there was a mug that could be picked up.
Right.
It's not an idea. The idea exists, but the mug also exists.
Yeah. And nobody's saying that that the composite parts that flow out from the idea don't exist. That the idea represents, that the language represents. No one says those things don't exist, but which one is more fundamental? If you had no idea of a mug and no idea of communication and no idea of how to tell me to do something, then there is no reason, there's no meaningful sense in which the mug exists. Like, the mug itself is
my idea of the rock.
What?
The rock is more real compared to itself than my idea of the rock compared to the rock.
No, I disagree with that because you use the word rock.
You literally can't.
No, because the rock has no conception of being a rock. So it's not more real.
It doesn't need to be conceived of to be there.
No, the point is we're talking about literal and we're talking about meaning. And so rock has no meaning if there's no conception. Rock has no meaning.
Right, but again, you're talking about words and ideas, and you're saying whether or not these correspond to reality. The reality is always going to correspond to reality more than any conception or idea of the reality.
Except unless the reality... So this is also something that you're throwing away, is that reality is fundamentally ordered towards purpose and logos. So let's start this video again, just because you missed an important sort of fundamental point building on this argument. Basically there is, when you use language, what you're doing is using metaphor. And so when you use language to say that rock is real, that is a highly metaphorical statement. That there's no sense in which that's like
what
this.
What do you mean by metaphor?
Well, maybe by metaphor, I mean you're representing. I mean, it's better to let Jonathan Pageau do it, but every single word you're using is directed towards purpose. And so when you describe this like neutral, literal reality that you're trying to describe, which I don't think exists in any sense, what you're trying to describe is like a purposeless sort of fact, right?
I mean, again, you're just like saying because we use words that reality has this sort of innate purpose, but that's only to do with conscious minds.
Well, there's just no other way to conceive of reality other than through a conscious mind.
Because we're conceiving of reality. But
yeah,
if we're
exactly.
talking about trying to remove our conceptions from reality,
which you can't do, is what I'm saying. No, but you can't do it. But you simply can't do it because you're using rock, you're using language, like every single thing you're doing, even in your mind, prior to language, is ordered towards purpose. Like you're trying to, for instance, communicate this idea that you have to me. It's ordered towards a purpose.
Again, we're just delving into solipsism again. You're just saying that, everything is to do with your mind, therefore you can't escape your mind. And it's like, sure, if we really want to get back all there, I can't remove my mind from my experience because it's my experience. But like that has nothing to do with how my experience correlates to the experience of reality. Like,
and I think it has everything to do with it. So let's watch this video. Let's watch this video.
When talking to people about symbolism is the whole problem of the literal versus metaphor idea. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but I think I want to dive into that problem and show you guys that, in fact, it isn't very much of a problem once you realize that there is no such thing as literal. Welcome to the symbolic world. Now, of course, I already hear a bunch of people screaming, no, he's saying that that the Bible didn't happen, that that everything is just a metaphor. No, exactly. I'm trying to break that duality. I'm really trying to destroy it, because it is really not useful in understanding how meaning occurs and how things manifest themselves. Now, when I say that there's no such thing as literal, what I mean by literal is this strange, pervasive idea that is still there in the West, it seems, that there is such a thing as a direct description of something, that there is such a thing as a description of something which is not bound up in meaning, and which is not bound up in narrative or an image, that it is somehow a meaningless description, that there is no it's not it's not already imbibed in meaning.
Does that make, do you see where he's the starting point that he's starting out from, that even a scientific observation?
He's just saying that linguistically every word necessarily is a web, like a notch in a web corresponding to other words, like rock is made of pebbles and shit. But like, again, this has nothing to do with reality. It's just
not quite. No, and it has everything to do with reality, because you don't even know what reality is.
How we experience reality. It's not the same.
That's what you're presuming, that there is some reality outside of what we know it to be. Right. So, what you can't disprove, the problem of hard solipsism. So it's funny that you're sort of like sticking on this, like there is this thing. But anyway, forget. It's more than just the words. He's not just saying there's this like web of words. He's saying there is no direct experience of anything not ordered towards purpose. Can you think of a single thing which you could directly experience not ordered towards some sort of purpose?
What do you mean by ordered, and what do you mean by purpose?
Well, just, take it, you define them however you will.
By ordered, you mean how it works? Yeah, everything works the way it works. And if you're talking about purpose,
that's
you mean
not,
this, like...
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's what I assume you'd have to mean by order. It's a mechanism that works how it works, at least in the most basic sense.
Okay.
But if we're talking about purpose, you mean like some ultimate meaning. I disagree, because I don't think that you could prove that without your senses, reasoning, and experience. So you're just using it to prove it.
Well, I'm not really trying to prove anything. I'm just asking you if there's any sort of like scientific observation or discovery or anything you can experience.
Even if there was, you just say I used language to describe it to you and circle back around.
No, I do want to go prior to language. I do want to go prior to words. To me, it seems like
go prior to experience or language, then we don't have to have this discussion. It's proven.
Right. So yeah, the most sort of like, a good way to think of it is like embodied versus like disembodied a little bit. And so like the most embodied experience that I can possibly imagine is the sun hitting my face and feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. How's that?
What do you mean? Like, why is that disembodied?
No, that's embodied. That's the most embodied.
That's embodied.
That's like the most. That's the most like.
If you're just by
that's the closest to literal we can get, pretty much.
I mean, by embodied, you just mean if we experience it, then everything's experienced. So
no, I just mean you know it to be a physical, real thing.
I know it to be a physical, real. I mean,
real in the sense that you want to use real. Obviously, I think like everything is real in a weird way, but
I mean, so like my main thing here is that like I'm pretty sure this breaks down like your actual view, which is why it's very confusing.
Okay.
Because
how so?
Don't you think that like things like rocks are mind independent?
Yes.
They don't depend on minds to exist?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So
well, I think they depend on the mind of God to exist. No, they do depend on the mind of God, but they depend on an objective mind. But yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like before we assume God, I'm going to say that the rock is mind independent, or you could call God something other than a mind, whatever.
Right.
So like if you just say the rock exists mind independently, that's the literal statement of things. Whether or not the word is used to instantiate its existence is a separate fact, because obviously we exist, our minds exist. The hypothetical assumes no minds.
Okay, I'm not sure how this breaks apart my worldview, or what.
Well, because it's basically saying that literal facts do exist without minds. It's literally presuming that.
Well, no, because there is, but rocks, in my view, personally, in my worldview, my actual worldview, were designed for like towards a purpose. Like they occupy a hierarchy of things, of which humans are as high as like material things can go, where they're sort of meant to be the bridge between the, more basal multiplicitous
well, I mean,
things.
I think Jesus would be, but
yes, he would be the perfect human. He'd be the top human. So he'd at the top of the hierarchy of humans, and then coming down, we have the rest of the humans, wherever they're meant to be. Like holy people higher, and really evil, horrible people much
saints
lower.
and shit, yeah.
And then then there's animals, and maybe even like if we find out there's aliens, then there's they're on the same level as humans or whatever.
So you're just saying that everything. So you're just saying that everything is mind dependent, and God is that mind.
Yes, yeah, and everything exists in hierarchy. Everything exists in.
Well, I mean, whatever about the hierarchy, it's kind of vague. So we could discuss that all day about what the fucking hierarchy is. But like,
sure.
I mean, I imagine you'd have to be like some things are good, some things aren't. So whatever falls in that hierarchy. Is fine.
Sure.
But
yeah.
like, so you're just saying.
Well, it's also a hierarchy of multiplicity versus unity. I think we can get into that at some point, because I actually don't understand why that needs to be the case. However, the thing that I really want to get into here is that like you think that everything is mind dependent. Yeah.
Now, I would be presuming that you mean the mind of God.
Yeah.
However, I would then ask how you reach the mind of God with the only knowledge that you exist.
How I reach the mind of God with the only knowledge that I exist?
Yeah, that's it. The only necessary existence that you know exists from like the problem with solipsism is you.
Yeah.
So how do you get to God from that?
I guess I presuppose to know other things. Via the laws of logic.
You know things. Cool.
Yeah, but you do too. I mean, everybody
does.
We can
both agree on that.
We can both
agree on that.
Yeah.
Both agree there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we both presuppose that we can know things.
Yeah.
Now, I can know things because of the reliability of my senses.
Okay.
How do you know things?
Because of the reliability of my senses, which I presume to be reliable because they were created by a person with a rational mind. But I don't know how you presuppose yours to be reliable, to be honest. I'm not sure how you presuppose that.
I don't presuppose them to be reliable. I demonstrate them to be reliable.
Oh, well, I mean, I can do that too, but but in order to demonstrate them to be reliable, you have to presuppose them to be reliable.
No, incorrect.
No, you do. What? Okay, I'm curious. How do you demonstrate your senses to be reliable without presupposing them to be reliable?
Because I don't have to presuppose anything to be reliable to do the thing. I don't have to presuppose that the pencil will work before the pencil works. I just have to pick it up and use it.
Yeah, but we're talking about your cognitive faculties, so your senses.
Well, yeah.
but you don't even know that what you're doing is what you're doing, unless you presuppose that that's the case.
Yeah, unless we presuppose we can have knowledge, which is what we're doing.
Yeah. So I agree. I think you have to do that. I agree with you. But
so do you. You have to presuppose them based on the continued reliability of their results, but you don't have to presuppose that they are working. You just have to presuppose them. You don't have to presuppose that they're working.
Yes, you do.
One day you could fall over, right?
What's that?
And that wouldn't be shocking to you if you don't presuppose that they're going to work. But if they're reliable for about 10 years and you have no reason to think that they will fail, that's the surprising part. I didn't presuppose that they will work. I just have a trust that they will because of their previous results.
Yeah, but I'm talking about you even being able to interpret the previous results. Like, you don't even know what the previous results are if they're not reliable. So you have the same presupposition. I don't see how this puts us at odds. I think we both agree that you have to presuppose your cognitive faculties to be reliable to do anything.
Well, no, because I don't think you have to presuppose them that they are reliable. Because, like, for instance, a baby that's born that dies because they fall over immediately.
Okay.
Didn't presuppose they were reliable because they weren't fucking reliable.
Right. Okay.
So I don't presuppose they're reliable. I have a history of them being reliable. So, for instance,
but that is the presupposition. That's the presupposition right there. That you have a history.
Are you presupposing the past?
Yeah, I mean that's part of it. The fact that you can you could interpret the past, that things that happened in the past actually happened to you, that there's a continuity of time, that you are the same self from time to time. Like, there's so many presuppositions baked into that.
You should have explained that shit first, because I was so confused for a minute. But, like,
yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that I can't presuppose the past. How do you get to the past without presupposing?
No. You can. You have to. You should. I have to as well, because of the problem of hard solipsism. Okay, yeah, but I just don't see why you're trying to say that you have some sort of, like, special ability to not presuppose the reliability of your faculties in order to use them.
Reliability of them, I presuppose them. Because I'm presupposing the past.
Okay, this is just getting... I don't even know it. Where are we going with this? Or what's the...
Well, I'm trying to see where our paths diverge on our, on our journey from solipsism here.
Okay,
so
okay,
I
got you.
presuppose the past.
Yeah.
And I then, based on the past, deem my cognitive faculties to be effective. Okay?
Got you.
I think we both do that.
Yeah, I think so,
okay.
Yeah.
So we haven't got to God yet.
No.
Okay. What's your next step? Where do you get God?
I trust my cognitive faculties because I can trust the past and the self and all the other transcendentals and whatever.
Uh-huh.
And so examining like history, examining theology, reading the Bible, in receiving the inspired word of Christ and the prophets and the saints, I trust them in a similar way that I trust my cognitive faculties. Also, the really important like personal relationship of
they have continued reliability,
daily prayer, and well, it's like they have as much as they have, right? So they can be wrong. I don't think Jesus can be wrong, but yeah, again, everything exists in a hierarchy. So, maybe at the top of the hierarchy, like below Scripture or below like the actual words of Christ, is my personal direct experience of like prayer and relationship with God and communion with God.
Now we've taken a step. We've taken a few steps.
Yeah.
So through your own personal experience and cognitive faculties, you have deemed it so.
Yes.
That the historicity of Christianity leads it to be true.
Yeah.
Now, is that logical truth?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So it's logical truth. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's logical to believe. I mean, I don't know what you mean exactly by logical truth.
So when I say logically true, I mean like 1 + 1 = 2. Something that naturally like resolves from one or two things.
I still don't know how exactly that applies to like historicity, but.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to debate here the historicity of what you believe on. That could be fucking ages. So I'm just going to accept it. If you want to say that Jesus rose from the dead,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
I don't think that logically follows that God is real, right? I don't think that the premise 1 and premise 2 get you to conclusion, right? But is there evidence for that? Sure, you could scientifically maybe make an argument. I don't think that's the case, but it wouldn't be logical truth. So that's what I mean by logical truth. So what kind of truth do you gain from the historicity of Christianity that gets you to believing in a God, and what kind of truth is it?
Well, I'm gonna say, I guess it is logic. Like to me, it pretty clearly follows that if somebody comes and says, "I am God, I'm the Son of God, I'm the Messiah," all these things, they perform miracles. They predict that they will be killed, even though they're the Messiah, but that 3 days later they will rise again, and that God Himself will raise him up, and then they are killed. And then 3 days later, they are risen by God. I'm going to say that the claims that they made earlier are verified by the fact that they actually rose from the dead. And one of those fundamental claims is that they are God. So that's where I derive that from.
Yeah, cool. So you're taking historians like proof and evidence type of belief, right? The same thing we use for like how Shakespeare existed, how shit like that existed. Like,
yeah, sure, yeah.
Not the definite, not that they absolutely existed, but that we have a lot of correlating evidence that they existed and did the things that people said they did.
Yeah, and then again, of course, my direct experience is going to come into play to validate those historical claims on a deeper level. But yeah. So I mean, I think you have to read. I think you have to take the past, and especially when you're evaluating historicity, on the basis of like historical evidence, like what counts as historical evidence, and how we do the rest of history. So yeah, I mean,
yeah, I would agree. The one thing that I would say is, so real human being wants to know what we define as truth. I would say that which corresponds to reality. I think Streets would say something like that which corresponds to reality as dictated by God, but
wait, so definitional truth. So wouldn't the prior of resurrection be incredibly prior? Wouldn't the like the
He's
probability?
saying there was no evidence of it before, and this is the first example.
Oh, okay. At least under
Which I mean
empirical.
isn't true in the Bible, but
Correspondence theory. I'm not sure. I don't know if I know correspondence theory, but that's cool.
but let's finish where I was.
Yeah.
going
Sorry.
with
What were you
this,
gonna say?
which
Yeah.
was-
What were you saying? What were you saying?
Which was, if you're using a historical and historicity like type of argument here, where it's like, okay, we have all these letters that were written to Julius Caesar, we have all these corresponding references as to what they believed about him, what he did, we have physical evidence about what he did, etc., etc. I don't think that not only does Jesus not have the type of evidence that would lead us to believe beyond he just existed, he doesn't even have the type of evidence to make us believe that he resurrected from the dead. It even says that only a few people were actually able to see him after the fact. Two,
that's
it would
not
be the
true.
first time this ever happened. We have no other historical evidence of this type of thing ever happening, such as resurrection.
Which you would expect, but fair enough.
I mean, you would expect that. I agree. Under your worldview, you would. However, it does mean historically it's not a strong argument.
No,
And
it doesn't.
three,
What does that mean? What? That makes no sense. We
Okay,
have
for
no
instance,
evidence
if
that
we have
Troy had
historical
ever been
evidence-
defeated before in battle. Therefore, they probably weren't a real city that was defeated. I mean, that makes no sense.
Oh, no, so here's the thing. It's not that generalized. Sorry, it's more generalized than that. There are cities that have been defeated, therefore it is reasonable to believe the city can be defeated. It's a historical view of evidence. It's not like a logical view. It's whether or not we have reason to believe that this individual...
But this is a
thing happened.
completely different type of city, right? Different
And this
type
is a
of man.
completely type of event.
Yeah.
Right? We have people raising from the dead.
Exactly.
That's not a normal thing. Cities falling is a normal thing. Even big cities falling is just a regular thing. Having someone be undone from death isn't a regular thing.
Yeah,
That's
but
my
that's
next point, which is there is no precedent for historical evidence based on this claim, and even if there was, it would be much higher than even trying to prove someone existed or what they did. It would have to be so well documented that it would be the highest documented thing in all of history.
Good thing it
And we
is.
don't have anything near
Good
that.
thing it is the highest documented thing in history, pretty much.
It's the highest written thing about
Yeah.
history.
So
It
what do
isn't
well then what
the
do you mean by
best
documented? Like there
thing
should be
in
pictures?
history.
Should there be pictures in a video?
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah, but you understand how absurd that is, right?
To expect that, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you
But
mean
would
by
that be
more?
proof?
How
Would that
could
be
it be
proof?
more documented? What would you do to make it more documented than it is, given all the evidence that we have for it, the historical evidence?
What would I do to make it more?
Well, yeah.
documented?
So like, say, pretend that you actually want this event to have been, what you consider to be real or literal or whatever you want to say.
if
What
you're
could
asking
you
what I would
possibly
do
have
for me to believe
provided
it
more than history actually gives us?
Yeah, okay. If you want me to just say what I would need to believe that this event actually happened,
Sure.
so I want to establish one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The idea in history that someone existed is a minuscule claim. There have been so many examples of people who we thought to have existed because there was documentation of them,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean minimal documentation of them that just ended up not existing. So
Okay.
historians do take just the words of writings a lot of the time. That's why I'm okay with believing Jesus existed, right? Because it's not a substantial claim, right? And it makes sense. It's not something that's absurd.
Yeah, and
right?
independent verification, and not just from the people that
Yeah,
want
it's
him to
not something
exist, and
that's
all the
absurd,
things.
right?
Yeah. Well, it's
And so
as factual as it gets, but anyway. Yeah.
I don't think it's as factual as it gets, right? We don't have the same
In
kind of
history, in history, it is.
No, it's not the
There-
same kind of evidence for Jesus existing that like Julius Caesar existed or your mom was real. Like it's not the same type of historicity. But if we're to say that I don't care about like granting him his existence, fine.
Okay.
Jesus existed. An itinerant Jewish rabbi existed. I don't care.
Gotcha.
And so now we have to talk about the fact that what kind of claim are we evaluating here? Because saying that a Roman Empire fell is proved by all sorts of evidence. The ruins, the writings, the people, all sorts of things.
Okay.
What kind of historical evidence could even come close to proving something like a man in the desert came back from the dead? What would we even want? And this is where I'm going to answer.
That's what I'm asking you. I have all the
agree,
evidence
and this is where
I
I'm gonna
need.
answer
I'm
your
asking
question.
you what we would need.
I know, and this
Yeah.
is where I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
I would need heavy, modern biological evidence that he was one, dead, and two, came back to life, three, within the time frame described, and four, I would need video evidence of this motherfucker being up and walking. Because you could give me false reports of biological evidence. I would need that.
So what you would need is an
Supposed to be
impossibility.
true.
You would need there to be a video camera in the year 1. You would need there to be biological evidence 2,000 years later, preserved 2,000 years later. So so you can't believe in this, is what you're saying.
Not even 2,000 years later. I would need it to be at the time, from the time.
But then even then you said you wouldn't trust that unless there was also a video.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously.
Okay, so you can't. Okay, I agree. I understand. You cannot believe in the resurrection. That's fine. I think that's
because historically the claim is so great.
I don't see how you can believe in Julius Caesar then either, or anyone, or Alexander the Great, or anyone.
Believing that people existed is not the same as believing that people come back from the dead.
Just did what they did. So okay, so you also have this like ontological, or I don't know what the word is, but you have some sort of like belief barrier from miracles as well. Am I correct in assuming that you believe miracles are impossible, or at least highly improbable?
Hold that miracles are impossible, or the magic isn't real, right? You don't have to believe that for the historical evidence to not support the resurrection. Resurrection.
But I'm telling you,
the resurrection is one of the most grandiose claims in historical evidence ever.
Yeah, but it doesn't need that. This is a big lie. This is like a big misconception that that's what is it like? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's just patently false. Extraordinary claims require the same amount of evidence as any other claim because it's evidence, as in something that points towards the truth of the event. Okay, so it just needs evidence, but there's plenty of evidence. In fact, you might even say there is extraordinary evidence.
Hold on. So you say that extraordinary claims don't require extraordinary evidence.
Absolutely
not. The
not.
exact same amount of evidence that any claim requires.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so you think that proving that I am here right now takes the exact same amount of evidence as Muhammad splitting the moon in two?
Well, no, not the exact same amount of evidence, but yeah, it doesn't require extraordinary evidence to say that Muhammad either did or did not split the moon in two. If there's evidence, that's a reason to believe it.
Does. The data.
Why does it need more evidence than anything else about Muhammad?
Well, okay, so
like you're a person sitting right in front of me, so that is extraordinary evidence.
Evidence that you would need to describe the Earth, the moon splitting in two would require so many scientifical like.
No, I wouldn't need scientific evidence because I wouldn't presume there to be science. There wouldn't be a camera or anything back then.
Well, yeah, I know they don't have a camera. Shit out of luck. Who cares? That's what you would need to believe such an extraordinary claim.
Maybe you, but not me.
If they had a camera, that's the type of shit that I need to be able to say that I existed right next to you right now. If it was also the type of evidence that you would say would also prove the moon splitting in two, except it wouldn't because you could also doctor the moon splitting in two if you had that type of video editing software.
So what you're saying is there's no amount of evidence that's good enough for you to trust or believe in a miracle, essentially. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's incredibly unlikely you could use historical evidence to make me believe in that. I think you could logically make me
believe and in that sense, I don't think you are consistent in using historical evidence to believe in anything that happened in history.
I absolutely am
but you're not being consistent because you're saying you can't believe this one thing that you already said is basically impossible for you to believe just because you don't accept the historical evidence. So what do you accept?
For me to believe, I said that the evidence that would require me to believe it would not have existed back then.
That is impossible. I mean, come on. What are we doing here, Infamous? How are you taking a historical event and not believing and throwing out historical evidence to describe the event and then saying you can also use historical evidence to describe every other event in history?
But Streets, it's not just a historical event.
It is.
It's not.
That is the claim. That's the claim. So are you going to argue with the claim or not?
I literally am.
But you're just presuming. You're just adding this whole like extra layer of like it's an extraordinary event, so it requires more evidence. No, for one, it does have extraordinary evidence. The independent attestation is just insane compared to any other person or event in history.
So Islam is true.
No, because it has less evidence than Christianity.
What kinds? What kinds does it have less of?
Independent verification of the splitting of the moon.
No, I'm talking about like literally Muhammad existing.
I believe he existed. I believe that has good historical evidence.
Okay, what about doing the things he did?
I mean, it depends. I mean, there's probably decent historical evidence.
Now we're getting into a part of history where if you're going to say that I dismiss the kind of evidences that would also prove what you believe, you're dismissing the kind of evidence.
No, but if there, whatever there's historical evidence for Muhammad about, I believe in, right? As long as it's historical evidence. I'm just telling you what I know to be the historical evidence of Christianity. I'm not a 6th century Arabic scholar, so I don't know everything about Muhammad. I don't know what is well attested and what isn't well attested. I do know more about what is well attested and not well attested about the Bible. Yeah, so I'm not sure what your point is. I'm not the one throwing out historical evidence. You're deciding to throw it out when it comes to one specific event.
I'm throwing out historical evidence. Let's not mischaracterize what I said.
That is exactly what you said. You said no amount of historical evidence is enough for you to believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Fair enough. That's fine. But that's you. That's exactly what you're doing. Okay, well, then what is it? Then what is it?
Streets. That would be ignoring evidence. That would be taking a piece of evidence and throwing it away and being like, I don't even consider it. That's not at all what I'm doing. I'm saying, given all of the evidence, all of it, giving it all to me, I don't think you can prove this claim, because the claim is that of a nature to where the historical evidence doesn't support. Because, for instance, what would you look for if Julius Caesar existed? What was the type of evidences that you would look for?
Independent attestation, a few different authors, maybe like an inscription somewhere about him from the time period that he's from.
You would look for evidence to the type of claim.
Yeah.
If a person existed,
what would we expect? Yeah, for sure.
If a person existed, what would we expect? We would expect the things you just described.
Yeah.
Now, if the resurrection happened, how do we confirm it with historical evidence?
Oh, do you want to know? I can actually give you that if you want.
How do we confirm that he was 1,
dead,
2, raised from the dead, and 3, was God? How do we historically prove that? With things we find today.
Okay, cool. Let's do it. And maybe it might be better to watch a video, but I can lay it out for you how I understand it and in my sort of layman's way, but let's do it. Okay, so 1, how do we know he's dead? Is that the first contention?
No. How do we know that he was dead?
Yeah, how do we know that he was dead? Okay. The efficiency and lethality of Roman crucifixion on throughout the world, throughout time, throughout history, means that they did a good job. That gives you evidence. That's not proof.
Probably dead.
Okay, all right. So you want to move on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay, so because there's a few other points on why he was probably dead, but fair enough. Okay, so if you accept that he is probably dead,
I mean, people die. Not that hard of a thing to do.
Exactly. So, and especially when they're being crucified, and especially
historical evidence is like lower standards than scientific evidence. So whatever.
Sure, whatever that means. Okay, so what's the next point? How do we know that he was buried in a tomb, or that the tomb was empty?
How do we know he was raised from the dead?
Oh, okay. So I'm going to go to the empty tomb, and I'm going to go to the martyrs, and I'm going to go to the conversion of Jesus' brother, James.
So you're going to take testimony is basically what you're saying.
Well, it's more than testimony, because it's like, especially in the case of the martyrs, for one, the empty tomb is verified by the fact that we have Josephus and other Talmudic Jews trying to explain how Jesus was not the Messiah and mentioning that there must have been some conspiracy to steal his body from the tomb. So the opponents of Christianity and Jesus in the very, very, very earliest days are already trying to explain why there's an empty tomb. What? Where's that source from?
This from?
We can pull it up. Josephus.
Is this in the Bible?
No, this is not in the Bible. That's from the Talmud. These are the opponents of Christianity.
That's why I was asking, because I couldn't remember whether or not that specific.
Oh, okay.
Was in the Bible.
No, because obviously in the Bible they just say he rose. That's why it's empty, right? They're not trying to explain.
Accounts of Mary Magdalene, et cetera, but.
Yeah. Okay. So do you need the source still for Josephus and the Talmud?
No, I just want to know where it came from.
Okay. So empty tomb. I think there's good reason to believe in that. Now, what are the explanations for an empty tomb? Either there was a conspiracy by the early Christians to steal the body out of the tomb, then the obvious one is that he literally rose from the dead or something like that. A miracle happened.
Well, I mean, debatable, because if he rose from the dead, I don't think he could lift the rock, but sure.
Why not?
Because being raised from the dead doesn't mean you can lift that rock.
You're right. It just means a lot more than... It means you have the power to do something much more insane. But
well,
fair
I mean,
enough.
first of all, he was raised from the dead, not he didn't.
Right, so
raise
God couldn't
himself
move
from
the rock. Wait, hold on. Let me respond to realist
I mean,
human
then
being.
you have to historically prove that he did that. So,
Let me respond to real human being real quick. So,
yeah,
I don't think evidentialism gets you to Christianity, as evidence is interpreted through webs of belief. Thus, comparing webs of belief is probably wiser. I completely agree, real human being. I do think the transcendental argument is stronger than evidentialist arguments, but it is fun and interesting to get into the evidentialist arguments because there's this presumption that there is no evidence when there is evidence. So that's what we're talking about right now. And we do argue about the transcendental argument quite a lot. So, if I may be a translator between you two, the way I understand that Infamous sees events that deviate from his past experience as requiring more evidence. Essentially, the resurrection would be so unusual that it would require more evidence than we can even access. Streets, as I understand him, is saying that you don't want to raise your standards so high that you couldn't possibly prove it. I'm not necessarily agreeing with either of you, but just trying to understand both sides. I think that's a fair. Does that sound fair to you on your side, Infamous? I think we may have lost Infamous a little bit. Okay, we got Henry Laz in the other chat. How old was his wife? She was 9. She was actually 6 when they got married. Yeah, Infamous, you might be muted. I'm not sure. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. No. I said that I had to go while you were responding to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you're good. You're good. I'm still responding to Henry, so sorry. You keep doing whatever you're doing.
Henry.
Henry's in the YouTube chat. If it was caught in 4K, I would believe it, and that's good. That's dope, Henry. I like to hear that.
Can I be caught in AK? I like AK.
I think most historians believe he existed. That's absolutely true. All critical historical scholars, biblical scholars, historians believe that Jesus existed. There's a very small fringe that don't. The Talmud was written before. Shut up. The Talmud was written before, as it's always been a tradition of Judaism to have this sort of commentary. But it's also written after. I mean, there's still a Talmud that can be added to, and opponents of Christianity that I'm not saying that in like Christ killers, like a racist, anti-Semitic way against Jews, but technically the people that were writing trying to discount the resurrection of Christ, they're referred to as the opponents of Christianity in the early church. So that's all I mean by that. I don't think Jews are opponents of Christianity, but if you're writing a literal polemic against Christianity, that makes you technically an opponent of Christianity. Okay, so real human being. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the transcendental arguments and arguing webs of beliefs and the whole worldview is a stronger way to go. But I think you would see why it can be useful to argue the evidentialism to some extent, just because there's more than people presume.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, cool.
So, okay, you're basically just saying that here's all the explanations we have for how the story goes, right?
Yeah, so, and I think I wasn't quite done. So, body stolen, rose from the dead / miracles happened or whatever.
I guarantee by the end of this you are going to miss one.
Yeah, me too. That's why I'm trying to see if you can think of any that are also possible.
One of them is, I don't know.
Well, that's not really I mean, if you write "I don't know" on like a math test, that doesn't get you. If you go, okay, but if your history teacher's like, "Did George Washington cross the Delaware in 1863?" and all you go is like, "I don't know," because all we have is like eyewitness testimony of that. That's not really an answer to the question, is it?
I mean, also it's a less important claim, I think. I think the importance of the actual claim matters, not the nature of its claim, as in like.
Yeah.
Like whether or not it's hard to prove. I think whether or not it being important is because if it's completely negligible, I don't give a fuck, right? Like,
right.
Oh, I stepped on a bug the other day. Cool. I'm just gonna fucking take your word for it. I don't need any evidence.
Sure.
But like, if you say like, hey, I have $1 million in my back car, I'm like, yeah, you're gonna need to show me that shit. Like,
right.
So that's why that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Like, if you just say I stepped on a the other day.
Yeah.
Sure.
But that's why, that is why the evidential arguments are important, because you have to dismiss these evidence. You have to be able to say why there might be an empty tomb and why the martyrs believed so aggressively that they would be burned at the stake and crucified.
9/11, correct?
No. So what's the point of that?
That means that you can believe something with veracity without needing to it be true.
Yeah, but the people that did 9/11 didn't say witness Muhammad being a false prophet or witness their own So that's the important point. That if there were some,
it doesn't need to go that far. It just needs
no,
to
it does.
You are doing something that you believe to be true and did something drastic or experienced something drastic for it to be done.
But if you hid the body, you know it's not true.
If you hid the body, you know it's not true. How?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean?
The claim that's what it's expected.
The claim that they died for is that Jesus rose from the dead bodily.
Correct.
So if they were the ones that hid the body or constructed this conspiracy, they knew it to be a lie. Oh, so like somebody else might have or something?
The fact is it's gone.
Yeah.
Who knows what happened?
Right.
If they don't know what happened, and then they make up this story and believe it, because it's like, oh, he said all these things,
yeah.
Or I believe in the Jewish revelation.
Well, that's not, that's another, that's another important piece of evidence. This was anathema to the Jewish idea of the Messianic coming. The fact that he would die alone was already like, especially without enacting some sort of massive political victory, was like totally just controversial, totally unexpected, actually like what the opposite of what the Messiah was supposed to do. So he wasn't even supposed to die, so they had no conception of him coming back to life.
What he was supposed to do, then, I mean...
Well, because what happened,
I think that might be evidence against what you're saying.
No, because actually it ended up doing exactly what was prophesied in this much larger way that rippled throughout history. So part of it was the conversion of the Roman Empire and the actual toppling of the Roman Empire. But in this longer, slower, drawn-out way, more lasting way. But what they expected at the time, just from reading the text and misinterpreting the text, was that because obviously they'd have to have misinterpreted parts of Isaiah, which say he will be crushed, his clothes will be cast in the lots, and he'll be stabbed, and all the things in Isaiah that talk about the resurrection as this prophecy. The crucifixion.
Wasn't he also literally stripped when he was made bear the cross?
Yeah, yes, he was stripped, and then literally they like.
I don't know why people talk against those verses. Like those things happened to him. Like it's kind of obvious.
No, definitely
in that order, but sure.
Yeah, and the casting of the lots and all this stuff. Anyway, so the prophecy did come true in even this bigger, more like lasting way. But what they expected at the time was that it would be like an immediate, kind of like a King David, like, oh, we're going to get a quick, easy political victory right now. Jerusalem will be like freed from the Romans. And what's happened is like the whole world was freed from the Romans. Yeah, and that's what the Zealots and Judas and that's what they
Judas
thought.
wanted to lay war and like across the Romans and become the new king, like of not Rome but of Israel, and then replace Rome with Israel. But
right.
If we're well, at least that's what scholars think, right? That's the most reasonable thing that we can find in the Bible and like the other accounts of Judas.
Yeah,
I'm sure you're familiar with like the fact that Judas is probably not his name.
Oh yeah, I believe that. I mean, the names are so hard because it's like obviously they're basically Romanized versions of whatever those people's names were.
He would have been like from someone from Jude, right? Like,
right.
That would have been his thing, and from what they believed about the Messiah, you can kind of tell what he might have believed.
It's also kind of fun. There's a kind of funny detail I always think, because there's another Judas in the group that's described in Matthew. It's like there's Judas, son of Peter, or whatever it is, and then Judas Iscariot, who would become the betrayer. And I just imagine like after the Judas stuff goes down, everyone's like shit talking Judas, and then the other Judas like, hey, come on guys, hey, it's not all Judases, not all Judases are bad, you know. So anyway.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like I fully believe that like what's going to happen here. First of all, I don't believe that the conviction with which they believed the thing means the thing is true. I don't even think it's evidence towards the thing is true, especially in your worldview, where a lot of people believe a lot of things and do a lot of drastic things in order to do the things, and they're wrong in your worldview. So I don't think that that's any evidence towards that at all.
Yeah, but in my worldview, they don't know that they're wrong. They actually think pretty aggressively that they're right. And given this conspiracy thing, the only one that kind of makes sense, but it still doesn't explain the empty tomb, is the hallucinations. But that even that is pretty shaky. Like that they were having like that they loved Jesus so much that they had these like, you know, guilt or shock hallucinations of him. In the case of
people living in the desert, but yeah.
In the case of Paul on the road to Damascus, it would be like he felt so guilty. The theory, the like secular theory, is that like he felt so guilty about like persecuting Christians that he just like manifested this, vision of Christ or whatever. Which,
I mean, I'd argue there's even a thematic view for that because Judas had the same thing.
Yes, yeah. Judas definitely did feel guilty and should have.
and also saw Jesus
yeah.
in it wasn't actually Jesus though. It was like a fucking conjuration of the devil, and then the devil killed him. But
right. Yeah, I think that's the way.
He killed himself, and
he killed
arguably
himself
was possessed by the devil. But
in that field, the Akeldama or whatever, the field of blood.
Funny enough, people there are certain scholars who think that possession of Judas by the devil on that day is fully representative of the fact that Judas is the most evil human being.
That makes sense. That could be interesting. Yeah, I could see that.
He also takes the place of the devil in Jesus's life if we compare Jesus to God.
Right. He definitely is the antagonist, more so than the devil actually is, because the way Jesus deals with the devil is so easily. And then Judas is like who do you think you're basically Jesus' whole attitude towards the actual devil himself is like, who do you think you're talking to? Which is so funny to me. I love it. So I understand that in your perspective it will require much more concrete proof. The evidence is not enough to prove this extreme claim that Jesus was both the Son of God
from the dead,
that he rose from the dead. I just presented what evidence I know, and maybe there's some others, or maybe there's not, and people can draw their own conclusions. But yeah,
there's an interesting argument that a lot of Christians make, which is one I don't believe in. I think it's actually kind of weird to mention it.
Okay,
which is the accounts of a woman is suspect, and it's
that is a good evidence, actually.
It's absolutely not.
So let's hear why you think that's a bad evidence.
Well, so because it takes many women to have the veracity of trust that one man has. How many women get sent to many women?
No, just 3.
Many? And then what do they do? Yeah, that's many.
I mean, that's not that many, and they still wouldn't trust them. I mean,
how many women do you think were around when that law was made? It's literally I'm pretty sure what's the pure division of what a woman's word to a man's word in the Bible? I don't know.
I don't even think 1,000 women would stand up to one man's word. I'm not sure though. We could look this up, and I don't know, but
I don't think that's true, especially because listen, we can look it up, but it's a reason why I don't think it's true. The other thing is who goes to anoint bodies.
But why also? Well, no, it makes sense that the women would go to attend to the dead body and to anoint, but that's also because they viewed dead bodies with such loathing and lowness that of course that they would send the women to do it. That's how much they didn't respect women in a weird way. But
whenever you're asking someone about anointing bodies, who do you go and ask for their opinion? The women.
Yeah, but that makes it more believable. Okay, so the idea behind it's called the criterion of embarrassment, is that if you were purely constructing this story in order to serve your own theological purposes, you would just make it men. You would make it the disciples, 3 men, 1 man, 5 men, all 12 of them who found Jesus. If you were trying to construct the story to convey a theological point and make it feel more believable to the ancient world. And that's not what they did, which is evidence that it's a historical.
To anoint bodies, it's women. And what do they do immediately after? They don't go.
Well, it doesn't have to be an anointing.
They go tell the men.
It doesn't have to be an anointing where they find out. So it's totally. It would be totally extra at best, and actually strange if you were creating this story as some sort of lie or just for theological purposes to make it women who first encounter Jesus. It doesn't make sense.
To be very specific, well, obviously, I think it actually does make theological sense, because when you consider Mary is the first woman that Jesus ever saw, and you consider that most of his friends early on in his life was Mary Magdalene, etc. But whatever. The only other thing, also that women anoint bodies, so that's thematically whatever. Anyway, the whole thing about it being a lie, that's not what I'm saying. They believed the thing. That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Which lines up with
who took the body? Yeah.
Not a clue. Don't even know if it was a who. Could have just been eaten by fucking sandworms for all I know. I have no idea what happened.
That's fair. That's fair.
I have not a clue what happened. And if you try and explain it with 2,000 years of hindsight, I think that's ridiculous.
Yep. And I don't think it's ridiculous. I think there's value in it, but I do think that it's not the strongest argument.
Sure, there's morally value. Yeah, sure.
So there's, I'm just presenting the evidence, and there's probably a better case to be made that we could find for each points of those evidence. Like, I'm sure you could get into hours of topics about each individual part: empty tomb, women finding the body, yada yada yada, martyrdom.
Yeah, I think we already came to the conclusion, which is I think that I think you would agree that there is claims that require more extraordinary evidence than less, right? You would agree with that now? For instance, I say I stepped on a bug, you believe me. I say I have $1 million, you're like, I'm going to need more evidence to believe that than just your word. Like, by definition, you need more than just my word, which is more evidence.
I guess. But I wouldn't believe you per se that you stepped on a bug. I guess I would want more evidence about the $1 million, because I don't really care if you stepped on a bug. But if you showed me that you had stepped on a bug and you also showed me that you had $1 million, I would accept them on the same level of evidence. Like, if you showed me a squished bug on the bottom of your shoe and you showed me your bank account that has $1 million in it, I would believe them equally the same. I wouldn't need more evidence that I wouldn't also need to go to your bank and talk to your bank teller and do an audit on your taxes. And like, I would just believe you based on, if you showed me the $1 million and you showed me the squish bug, I would believe you. So that's the same amount of evidence.
Because here's the thing, is that you would need more evidence to believe the $1 million thing, because there would be a prior to this, right? The prior to me being a millionaire is me being literally broke, right? And the prior to me stepping on a bug is me not stepping on a bug, right?
Right.
One is way more common than the other thing. Therefore, they require different types of evidence and more evidence. So the different type of evidence would be for the money, which is you want to see the money, you want to see that the money is real, and you want to make sure that, first of all, you get some of that money.
Sure, yeah.
You want to make sure that I didn't, probably get this money in a bad way, right? The other thing is the bug has none of those requirements, because one, they're not important, and two, they're not hard to believe. Me saying I stepped on a bug, well, that happens every fucking day.
Yeah.
Right? You going from broke to a millionaire does not happen every single fucking day.
Yeah, but just because I care
so in the same
more.
way that people exist
in
history, I'm willing to believe Julius Caesar existed based on the evidence that we have.
Okay, I understand. Yeah. I do understand.
I'm not willing to believe people raised from the dead based on the evidence you have, and I think that the evidence you have for the resurrection is...
It's not powerful. I understand that the evidence that I presented to you for the resurrection is not powerful to you.
Well, not just you. I'm not saying it's your fault. I like in general, like any evidence that I've been presented for.
I know.
Evidence that Jesus was resurrected.
Yeah. I realize that does not have like persuasive power to you, and honestly, to me, it didn't either. Before I already started believing. So I'm just presenting the evidence for what it is. I don't think that's usually a good conversion tool. Not that I have any pretension that I could convert you in any way, but that's the evidence. That's the presentation of it. People can go into it. They can, consider it more deeply. I think there are still questions if you want to deny the resurrection, given the facts that we have. And I don't think it's as simple as we know for sure that it didn't happen, or we can just rule it out. So that's where I'll leave that.
I'm not saying we know for sure it doesn't happen, because it's literally an unfalsifiable thing.
Yeah.
We can't say that.
Yeah. Okay, so... what direct eyewitness accounts are there for Jesus raising from the dead? I think the gospel was written 90 years after the death of Christ. So the latest gospel, the latest date, would be 90 years after the death of Christ. Fortunately, the earliest gospel is only like 20 to 30 years after the death. The next earliest one is about 50 years after the death. So there's a range of how long these things are. Two of the gospel writers are historically accepted to be eyewitness disciples of Jesus. And furthermore, all the apostles who sort of come after that and possibly wrote John, an apostle probably wrote John. These are not exactly eyewitnesses.
Is really lowballing it, dude. I'm not going to lie to you.
You think I'm lowballing with those numbers?
With 20 years? Yeah. Like the
20 to 30 years.
I can even imagine is like
Mark,
30 or 33.
Mark is usually credited to be between the 50s and the 60s. So I don't know where you're...
But yeah, even then, like the latest for the crucifixion is 33 CE, and the latest for Mark is 65 to 75.
The latest for Mark. Years. A lot of people make Mark in the early 60s, but whatever. I mean, so I said 20 years. I said 20 to 30 years, didn't I? That would be literally 55 to 65.
Yeah, but 20 years is not even possible. Like it's
that
not
is
even within the
100% possible. I don't know what you're talking about.
Let's take the latest crucifixion, which is 33.
Yes.
And then let's take the earliest mark, which is 65.
The earliest mark technically would be like 33 and a few months because it's supposed to come from an oral tradition from the eyewitness account of.
Yeah, but we're talking about gospels.
Okay, so if you want to talk about when it's literally written down, my understanding is that it can be between around 55 and 65 or something like that. I don't think I was
65 and 75 CE. That's Matthew is like 75 to 85. Luke is 80 to 90.
Okay, I mean we can. There's
no way. It's like 90. Never mind.
Again, they haven't. There's no such thing as like carbon dating for these things, so that all comes from literary analysis, which we don't know. But fine, all right, I'll give you 65 then, whatever. So that's 30 years past. David wants to say, let's say 50 years, but that's not what it is. I mean,
I would say 50 years. 50 years is a bit late.
50 years is too much for the earliest
it's at
gospel.
Most like 42. Like
yeah, at most I would say it's like 40, really 35 to 40 years probably. But I think there are arguments, and I'm not sure how well they are accepted for earlier datings of Mark. But fine, I'll give you guys the later datings. It's still eyewitnesses, and it's still within one generation. And then everything else is still the second generation. So it's an eyewitness to an eyewitness, which is an important thing. That still has some level of validity. More so than this, like, they're written 200 years later, nobody knows what happened. Like, there is... Mark is considered 70 AD because of the temple prophecy. That's if you assume that Jesus could not have made predictions. So you'd have to assume to date Mark at 70.
However, that's not what it's considered. Like that is a thing. It's just not considered that way by most scholars. Like
right.
I've heard that argument, and like it'd be great if it was true, but
yeah, right.
Scholars don't consider it 70. 70 would be fucking amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think even the Bart Ehrmans and stuff are gonna say like, well, he made a lucky guess or whatever,
Matthew and Luke also use Mark as a source, so like it has to be before them, and it has to be somewhat comprehensive. So
yeah.
It's the shortest one, but
for sure.
It
Bart
also has no references to the destruction of the temple, so it has to be before that.
Right.
I feel like that's something you would have mentioned in your gospel if that happened. Like you would have
if the temple had already been destroyed and you were writing it.
Yeah, you would have at least mentioned it. So like it has to be before the destruction of the temple.
Probably would have. Yeah, definitely. Which I guess happened around 70, either 70 or 77. I'm not sure, but and yeah, also arguments from silence are not good arguments. But anyway,
I think if we're talking about the earliest writings, like other than the Gospels, you've got like. I think I'm not like a biblical weren't Paul's letters like 10 years beforehand or something?
Yeah, Paul's letters are earlier than the Gospels. That's important too.
Yeah. So Paul's letters is like 10 years before the Gospels. As they reference Jesus and like they don't, but they do reference the narratives
and
like
the theology is clear. That's why this thing like they did no conception of Jesus as God. It's like, well, Paul has it and he's writing before them, so I don't know where you guys are getting that from. Okay, so then David has a good point here, so an important point. Also, I think it matters what kind of things were believed in back then. Most people probably believed in resurrection. People believed in witches just 100 years ago, so it's not surprising that people believe someone could raise from the dead. This is an important point. Most people did not believe in resurrection, especially not early Jews, especially not for their proposed Messiah. But beyond that, this is used a lot to be people like, oh, people were just naive back then. Oh, people just didn't know what the natural laws were. Okay. They say that about like the virgin birth or whatever. Like, oh, people just believed that because they were naive or whatever. No, nobody believed in virgin birth when Jesus was born of a virgin. So there's this like there's this misconception of like just the total stupidity and naivete of ancient peoples when they weren't that stupid. There were things they were naive about, obviously.
I 100% agree with this. I 100% agree with this, and I'm sick of people saying that, like, oh, the fucking ancient Mesopotamians, how did they build such amazing structures if they were looking for food and water? What, did you think they were hunter fucking gatherers, dude? They're human beings. They have the same brain capacity we do.
Right.
It's stupid to think that they don't. However, now I will say this. I think it is likely that they had doctoral or sociological disadvantages when compared to like evaluating the truth. Like,
Sure.
for instance, if you're raised in a society that believes racism is okay, you're never going to, like, you know,
Right.
it's going to be very hard for you to not believe that, right? That's different than you being like, oh, these were ape people. Like, come on now.
Yeah, that is a common misconception in the modern world that, yeah, David, I know you're not calling them, I know you're not doing this, David, but just to address those people who have this false conception of ancient people as being totally moronic, like little naive babies or something. No, they're people just like you and me. Like, the brain has not changed that much since them. And an important point,
not at all.
like literally, like not at all in a meaningful sense, probably. Yeah, I'm just saying to your proposition that people just believed in resurrection or believed in, well, you just said resurrection, so I'll stick to that. That was not, even if they had myths or something about like Apollonius or Romulus and Remus or whatever they had, that was known to be a totally divine and rare thing. So even if they thought like, oh, maybe this is possible, whereas today we think it's not possible at all, if we think that, to the extent that people think that, they still saw it as totally unique, totally important, totally like special, very not important. An everyday event. So
now, to be fair, I do think that there were a lot of people back then that thought it was actually heresy, right?
What was her that he did
that
rise
from rising from the dead was like evil.
Right.
You were like a saint or something.
Right. Yeah, it's probably witch-like or something like that. Yeah. Wait, we got a real human being. So I'm not. That's what I heard. Art. To be fair, that's an art. Okay. We are. Well, I think it's like we are all Dilla monkeys at heart. I do. I'll give that a monkey emoji. How about that? I'll give that a monkey emoji. That's funny. Okay. Cool. All right, Henry. I don't know if you're still here, but I know you wanted to watch a Mellow video. Doesn't look like he's still here, so that's okay. In that case, I might go back to. This could be interesting, but let's do a shorter version.
Dude, the more and more we talk about Jay Dyer, the more and more I wish I was still debating, so I could maybe debate Jay Dyer.
That'd be fun. You should try to. I mean, I always thought about popping into a stream and presenting some of your points that obviously I still don't agree with, but see how he would react with them. Maybe you should just hop in there.
I don't like being like, listen, dude, as much as I like Matt Dillahunty old, I don't like him muting people every 5 seconds and talking over him, which was exactly what would happen on like a stream. Like
if you went to Jay Dyer's. But see, if I went,
it happens all over the place.
No, I know, but if I went to Jay Dyer's stream and like, listen, I'm a I'm a junior apologist, and I deal with people that present this as an argument. How do you respond? I don't think he would mute me. I mean, he wouldn't need to mute me. I would just listen to how he responds. Yeah.
Like this open discussion that we have, I'm more comfortable with this than I am like going on someone's stream where they're like in front of a couple hundred people and they're like, okay, I have a reputation to uphold, so I'm gonna beat this guy and make sure that I win. And I'm like, I don't like that shit. Because I can tell that like we're okay with debating. At the end of the day, like
it's no hard feelings.
I'll never change your mind. You'll never change my mind. But if he's shown to be wrong, like trust me, I've been around people that are too invested in being right. And Jay Dyer, even Matt Dillahunty are like this. Like, I just can't do that.
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah, and I don't really have a desire to do that per se either. I kind of like what we're cultivating here is like an open discussion thing where people can just pop in and ask questions, present their takes, and we can go back and forth. We can debate, or we can back off from debating, or we can agree, and all sorts of different angles to take. I think it's fun. Okay. This is kind of interesting. And this is a debate, sort of. You know, it's a soft, I'd say debate light. So there's a guy that's going to be trying to present the view of like, there is some meaning to the word literal. And we'll see how Jonathan reacts to this.
And then, why don't you like it?
No, well, actually, the actual definition of literal, it means that which is close to the text. That's what literal means. That's why the word literal is in relationship.
Is that what it literally means?
Right. Literal means.
In terms of it being close to the text, yes.
Close to the text means the text itself, you could say. But what people usually mean by literal is something like a factuality without meaning, and that doesn't exist. There's no such thing. I don't think so. There's no such thing as
a fact without meaning.
A factuality without meaning, and I think that's not even controversial. Unless
I think it just means a fact without meaning, but like the fact means itself.
Yeah, I think that's so. I mean, again, it's like you don't have to disagree with him here. I think this is pretty intuitive but I think that is what sometimes people impose when they say literal.
It depends on what they mean by meaning, because like when you say meaning, I assume that you mean like someone's opinion on a thing, or someone's ascended purpose onto a thing, or assumed purpose onto a thing, right? Like the rock is for this, or the rock does this, like especially God, like God has purpose for everything in the universe, and therefore everything has meaning, right?
Right. And so what I think is what this is sort of a response to, it seems, in the broader dialogue around this, literal versus metaphoric, it's like when we're talking, and this is why I brought it up today, because as a continuation of when we were talking about Genesis on Wednesday, when we talk about the Garden of Eden and the question is asked, well, what literally happened? Like what actually happened? Was there a actual literal garden and an actual literal apple and a snake? And stuff like that.
We turned into fucking, what's it called?
Well,
what's his name?
The implicit assumption when that question is asked is that there is some sort of reality devoid of the meaning of the story.
Well, there would be no actual, like, in this specific instance, I actually don't think that this example works, because all things would be in the mind of God at that point, which means that everything has meaning, which means there would have to be some kind of literacy in the world. Because, like, I can't say that a rock is literal without God, you're saying. True, but when we're talking about your worldview, you can. So when I'm saying, was it literally there, you would have to answer, because everything is comported to the mind of God, so it does have a literal thing.
Jonathan is just going to say, Jonathan Pageau is just going to say, did it literally happen? Yes. Did the Noah's Ark literally happen? Yes. Did pick any story in the Bible, did it literally happen? Yes. And then, but what he's saying there is not that there is this, like, objective, that there is an objective reality, but that not that there is anything more important than than the purpose and the meaning and what the story presents you. So the literalness of it is the story. So there's no more real sense that there's a snake and an apple and an Adam and Eve than that there's a snake, an apple, and an Adam and Eve. That is the literal meaning. That is like the most foundational.
He uses the word literal. He uses like the old version of literal. He uses like what its etymology is.
Right.
I'm just using the modern definition, which is how we actually use the word.
Right, and he's saying he just disagrees with the modern definition. He thinks the modern definition is confusing and not helpful.
Well, but that's just, but I don't care, because the main thing is that when we use the words that we're using, it's prescriptive, it's not descriptive. So when he uses the word and he's using the old definition, he's just not conforming to how we use the word in English. Like, we use the word literal to say, and I just have it up right now, taking words in their usual or most basic sense without metaphor or exaggeration.
Yeah.
So if that is what we're talking about,
and he's saying,
we're not talking about this old etymological differences, then he's using the wrong definition and completely strawmanning anyone's argument when they say it literal.
Well, you might want to see how it plays out, because I also think that the word got corrupted, if that's what it means now. Like, I don't think there is such thing as using words without metaphor.
There is no such thing as using words without metaphor.
Yeah, I know I did a double negative, but so every time we use words, we use metaphor.
Oh, I wasn't confused by the double negative.
Okay. Yeah.
As long as you don't like fucking quadruple negative me.
Don't tempt me.
There is no words without metaphor.
We just don't we use words as metaphor, and we can get into that, but I'd prefer to let Jonathan get into it because he's smarter than me.
Any type of meaning. I wouldn't say that the way that people use the word literal means devoid of meaning or uninterpreted or something like that. I think it stands in contrast with metaphor.
So what people usually mean by literal is something that can be measured, right? And that has a certain weight and density, something like that?
Yeah, so what's useful for me would be to come up with two statements, one that's literal and one that's metaphorical. So if I was to say water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius under standard atmospheric pressure, okay, that's a literal statement. Her attitude froze me over. That's metaphoric.
It's interesting. It's like, it's so interesting. Because the idea like that the idea that naming the temperature of something, which is especially that, which is like an arbitrary scale of measurement, of changes in temperature. and that is, I would say that has a function, but that function is very rare. You very rarely encounter that function. Usually most people would be like,
and even the function of it is nested within it's like a scientific function. If you're going to make that scale of like temperature and say water freezes at 0 and that's the scale, that's for the purpose of doing science. So the purpose precedes the scale in any meaningful sense.
Well, no, because it doesn't have to precede it. It can be alongside it. Like, that's the thing, is that both can't, like, I don't see the reason why both can't be true.
Well, they are both true.
Right, so why is one preceding the other? They come
well,
into
the
existence at
purpose
same time.
does necessarily precede the scale, because if you had no purpose for finding out when water froze, you just simply wouldn't have that scale.
It precedes my discovery, but doesn't precede the idea.
Well, that's interesting. Like, the idea
like,
comes
for instance, if
before...
I do a thing, the confirmation of the thing and the thing both come into being at the same time. In fact, if we're talking about actual, like, how brains work, it actually comes into being before that. But
so what comes first? The idea?
well, so if we're talking about the fact, right? Obviously, we learn fact second to the thing happening, right? We are caused to believe the thing. So, like, if I'm being hyper skeptical here, like, technically the thing happens before we understand it, therefore the idea comes second, right?
Okay.
Like, obviously,
so
the
water
phenomena
freezes. So
happens
water
first.
freezes, basically, would be the first
like
thing.
water freezes before we understand that water freezes.
Right. So then, when we say that, like, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, yada yada yada, that has already come after something more fundamental, like a sense experience, like water freezes. It is cold. Water freezes. Something like that. Is that fair to say?
Say it again?
Okay, so already we've seen that, and this is really to say that literal... Okay, so say, like, you would say that it is a literal statement to say that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. Is that fair?
Sure. We can use any fact. We can just use any fact.
Like any fact X. Right. So, but there's something prior to the fact for us to even start to formulate that type of language, to start to even use scientific
but it's
language.
Not that idea.
No, it's the thing, right? It's like the water freezing itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm saying that when you're saying the literal thing, you're talking about the thing that
then the
existed
most
before the
literal
idea.
thing is not the scientific fact. It's this sort of abstraction that water freezes.
But that's not abstract. It does that.
Yeah, but it's not. Water freezes is more literal, is what I'm trying to say, than water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius.
After it happens.
What's that?
But it's not, because that only happens after it happens. Like, the
No,
idea
but
only comes into existence after the fact.
No, I know. So water freezes as just like those two words together, as close as we can. Again, even that we're already using words, which is already sort of weird.
I know. You're saying that the words exist.
So
right?
scientific.
But the things that the words are dependent on exist before the idea, but the idea itself only exists because of the phenomena. So
and so the phenomena is the first thing. I agree with you. Is more. That's why I was using the language of embodied. Like, the embodied thing is that, like, try to forget the words if you can, is that there's a lake and it gets cold and then it freezes over, right? So that's like the phenomena. Like, just forget language and science and words and stuff. Like, that's the thing. The brute's reality or whatever of that happening is the basal thing. And then we use language, and then we use scientific language. So scientific language can't be the most fundamental language. I mean, the most fundamental, like, literalness. The literalness is this sort of embodied, like, thing we can't even describe, really, that we feel or we see or we touch.
So
does that make sense? That's what we're trying to push towards. Like, that to resist against the fact that, like, scientific facts are literal, as in they are the most real thing. They're, like, at best a third order descendant from the most real thing.
Well, so I can see the way that you're doing this, but I feel like you're saying that, like, you have to presuppose something to then understand the idea, to then instantiate the idea as a fact, to then believe in the fact.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
But that's independent of the thing happening. when we talk, and I'm going to tell you to do the same thing, ignore what the words I'm saying are, right?
Okay, yeah,
and
yeah.
just imagine the situation. The situation happens.
Yeah.
Someone observes it.
Yep.
The idea begins.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Now, this at one point happened for the first time.
Yep.
Right? To the first organism, to the first consciousness.
Sure. Yeah.
And in that scenario, which came first? The thing or the web of ideas to relate to the thing?
The thing, yeah.
The thing. There you go. Now, just because every idea is stuck in that web doesn't mean that the things are secondhand. That's my only thing.
Yeah, no. I agree with you. I might have been confusing before, but now my thoughts are a little clearer. The thing is not the second hand. It's the scientific observation, which is like third hand. The formulation of the scientific fact, or as one might say, the literal fact that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius or whatever.
So you're just saying that, like, the thing happens, the observation happens.
Yes.
The idea is created to investigate the observation.
Then the language happens.
The science is.
Then the science is done. Right. So it's not the most literal thing. There's something more literal than that.
I mean, if you're saying the science isn't the most literal thing, I still don't understand what that. Because, like, here's the thing: is that science uses the observation in the method.
Yeah.
Like, the observation is the first thing in the method.
Yeah, and before the observation is the actual thing, like we decided.
Right, but the observation is the thing. Like, that's what I'm saying, is that you're not understanding the change, that the idea isn't the same before as it is after, right? So, like, the fact, you're right? That takes place beforehand.
Yeah.
Right? And then we have our intuitions or our thoughts about the thing, right? And then we go to investigate, right? Now, if we were talking about the next thing being the same thing as the fact, you would be right. It would come afterwards. But it's not. It's our new observation that is as close to the first thing as we can get. Right. So new observation,
and that's important.
New fact
as close as we can get is important. Yeah.
Right, but now new fact has occurred, right? Because you just admitted it's not the same as the first thing. It's as close as we can get.
Yeah.
So it's a new thing. It's just as close as we can get.
Yeah.
So now we're back at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
that goes all the way up into the hierarchies of meaning. Yeah.
Right, which means that every single hierarchy of meaning starts with thing happens.
Yes.
Not we have an idea of thing.
Right. Which
means that all things can be literal because that's what we describe as without having meaning.
Yeah. And so that's exactly what that's exactly the point. And I realize now how confusing I was being at the beginning when I said, like, the idea comes first. And I think I'm still somewhat right about it. The idea comes before the scientific observation, but really the thing happens. Then this is like the observation of the thing, which we've decided is third order. So to say, like, is this literal?
I disagree with the third order thing. That's what I'm trying to make you understand, is that...
Oh, what? I thought you just said the thing is not... The fact is not the same as the thing.
Okay, so I'll give it to you like this. Have you ever heard the... It's funny, it's a metaphor. Have you ever heard the saying, a man never steps into the same river twice because it is not the same river and he is not the same man?
Right. Yeah.
The idea does come after the initial fact, but then when we try and observe the fact again, another fact has occurred, right? It isn't this third order thing. It's the first order of a new order. Because it's not the same thing as the first river.
So what's more fun? But so if you didn't have any of the prior two things, could you have the new fact?
You could not.
So it is third order. I mean, what are you talking about?
No, it's not. It's not third order. It's because you're saying it's in the same category. It's not in the same category.
All right, fine. All right. It goes into a different category. I don't see the meaningful difference between those two things.
So the meaningful difference is that you have these sets of things that are, well, at least when you're talking about, like, you know, a person's life, right? Yeah. You have the thing happen, which is like the birth. Then you have the idea. Then you have another thing happen. Then you have an idea. Then you have another thing happen, an idea, and that just continues on and on and on and on forever. So unless you're talking about the 500th thing that happens to him is 500th order, then I don't think that this belief is tangible, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to say that any fact happens after my birth, because it's all dependent on my ideas.
Right. Okay. I guess I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, it's
all these events cause different thoughts, right? It's not that the previous event is based on a thought that I had before, or that the one after that is based on something I had prior. Like it's not based like that.
Okay. Well, let's move away from this third order, whatever. The point of this is that the thing happened, the beginning happened. This is the closest we can get to the actual thing that happened. And yet it is not literally the thing that happened. Essentially, is the point of that. Or, I mean, it's as literal as it can be, but that doesn't mean that there's some brute reality beyond this that is discernible.
Well, yeah, the word literal doesn't defeat solipsism, sure. But...
Right.
I mean, that's all you're saying, then sure.
Okay.
Freezes when
Let's
it's
continue.
cold. That's pretty functional. But like it freezes at this very specific like temperature. It's useful in the laboratory. It's useful if you're like, I don't know, if you're trying to freeze a certain element in order to do a certain experiment, but that's almost never the case. Like almost no one deals with that level of reality. Am I wrong? Like that almost no one ever deals with that level of reality?
Okay, the point is that I'm trying to put out onto the table statements that one can classify as literal and then metaphoric. And sure, we can say that there's some gradation, that there's some degree.
There's some degree.
No, because they're talking about temperature is why I laughed.
No, I got it.
Can be measured, that which is related to, weight and density and embodiment in the sense of like physical things that you bump your toe against, and things that these things are more, how can I say that they're more
concrete,
grounded. They're lower on the scale.
They're just using different words other than literal.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, look, how about this? He typed in a password onto his computer versus he unlocked her heart with kindness. So the former is literal. He typed in a password into his computer versus I unlocked her heart with kindness.
Which is it's hilarious that you think that one's literal. It's like, let's say, I mean, I don't know, we're going to get caught up in a bunch of stuff. So it's like, if you would have said, right, he inserted the key in the padlock and unlocked that would have been way closer to typing a password on your computer. The idea that we think that is unlocking is at the same level of metaphor, or whatever you want to call it, as unlocking someone's heart. Because you are not unlocking anything when you type a password in your computer. Not at the sense, if you want to bring it down to like the most like measurable, embodied ground on which we base our language. Like you're not going to find it there.
I get it. Let me try again.
And even the freezing one, like think about it in two ways. Like, think about it in two ways. Wait, sorry.
You have like, it sounds like, are you not able to see the difference? But if there is no difference,
I do see the difference. Obviously, I see the difference. But I would say to be, first of all, to be cautious that you think that you've grasped things like in a way that is absolutely, how can I say this? Like the idea that you can completely avoid what you call metaphorical language, even in the most literal thing that you can imagine, is completely impossible. There's absolutely no way. I mean, John Vervaeke does a great job at breaking this down, where metaphor is embedded in every single level of engagement that we have.
I don't know if you know John Vervaeke. He's a cognitive neuroscientist, sort of a Buddhist type of guy, but certainly not like, Christian or whatever it is. But he basically studies the meaning, how humans like sort of create meaning or interact with meaning or where it comes from. He's a really interesting thinker as well, John Vervaeke. But so the point with like the password, typing the password into the computer, that does sound like
it's technically not unlocking things in the traditional sense.
I mean, because if you were to describe, and it sounds more literal than like, so like unlocking my computer. It sounds a lot more literal than it really is when you get down into like what that actually means, like the ones and the zeros and this and that.
Yeah, and this is where I disagree with him, right?
Okay.
Because I agree that based on the other times, right, that the words meant different things, right? It would have been an allegory, right? Like when the word was created, it was definitely made out of the necessity for an allegory, right?
Yeah.
Just was.
Yeah.
It's no longer an allegory. That's just not what the word means anymore. The word can mean unlocking something like with a key. It can now also mean unlocking something with a password. That's how words change. They really change with our usages of them. And
but they never become more literal. They don't really become more literal just because they change, is what I'm saying.
I do think that they can become more literal.
Huh.
In fact, the word literal used to be more literal.
I think it still should be.
But now, but you know, like with the early 2000s, people started saying like fucking literally.
Oh,
like
literally, but that's what I'm saying. Like, and
shit
most
himself.
people
It's like,
find
okay.
that to be kind of annoying, or at least like, I mean, I don't find it that annoying. I do it personally, probably.
Yeah, everyone does it.
I think
now,
everyone
right?
does
That's
it.
just
It sort of
forward.
just happened, but I do think it's a corruption of the word. I mean, it makes words have less meaning, and that's what a word's whole purpose is to have.
But if something
meaning.
has less meaning, that makes it more literal. That's my point.
I see what you're saying, but I'm saying we can't ever devoid words of meaning, and so nothing becomes truly
absolutely.
literal.
They can't be devoid of meaning. Words have meanings.
Yeah. So nothing.
That's just true.
Yeah, I think I think we either agree or would agree to disagree in a valid spot on this.
I just think to say because the word, like, I just think to say that because words have meanings, therefore there's no such thing as literal things. Like, I think that's reductive. Like, I think that's just saying, oh, but literal is a word. It's like, yeah, so is objective reality.
Yeah.
So, like, just like if I ever said objective reality to you and you said, yeah, but objective reality, the thing you just said, is made of words that have meanings that aren't objective reality.
Right.
Therefore, you can't say it. I'm like, shut up.
Shut up.
You know what I
Exactly.
meant.
Yeah. And the point of this is not to be pedantic, but rather to mystify people. To engage myself by holding this view, and anyone who cares to hold this view of like non-literalness in the realm of meaning and purpose, more so than what we think is scientific and literal and empirical and whatever, because that's boring and drab. And it's not totally accurate, as we're trying to find out here with the whole password thing. What's that?
Because again, you said it's not completely accurate, but the words change to be more accurate.
Well, I just don't think the word did change to be more accurate, but
the letters didn't change, but our use of the word absolutely changed. If I said I unlocked something, right?
Yeah.
With a wand, right?
Okay.
It's metaphor because I just use a fucking bit of magic, right? And that's not what's happening, right? I'm not using it to turn a key or anything. I'm not using it to type in a password.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But if I'm in the 1960s, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, I unlocked it with a password. It's like, what the fuck did you even just say?
Yeah, it means nothing.
Words change with meaning. Words change with how we use them.
Yeah,
and so if we use them to mean certain things, then they become more literal. Like, that's what happens.
I thought...
Obviously, if you just use the word metaphor and describe a metaphor, then obviously those are less literal than if I say, I'm me. That's the most literal thing I can think of to say.
It's like, I'm me. Yeah.
Like, how is that metaphorical at all? I actually can't think of a sense in which that's metaphorical.
I am me.
Yeah, I am me. What else could that possibly mean? Self equal to self. Self is self.
I mean, you're kind of invoking the idea. I don't know exactly how it's metaphorical, if it is, but you're sort of invoking these higher ideas when you say that, like the law of identity and stuff like that. But
even so, they're words.
Yeah. Wait, so what's the problem with that?
No, there's no problem with that. I think that words can correlate to reality, even if it's a reality that we can't observe. For instance, the things we can observe for like the self, right? So if your problem is just that we can't observe directly objective reality, therefore all words have meaning, and the meaning invalidates their usage in reality to being objective reality, then what happens the minute we use them to use the self?
Well,
right?
okay,
that's self-statement.
No, that's exactly the point of this. Actually, that's a great point, because it's like we're talking. So once you start talking and using words, it's important to recognize that. Or like, forget using words and talking and stuff like that. We're talking about like, oh, well, what's the point of talking about the self if it doesn't have like a literal meaning, if nothing's literal or whatever? It's like, it's not really to get rid of the word literal. It's to bring it into this sort of realm of defining the self, not as a bunch of composite, purposeless, non-meaningful parts. It's to say that every word has meaning, every sentence, every structure is a meaning structure, and I think that could serve to give people more purpose than being like homunculus driving meat bag or whatever that we are.
I mean, in fact, I think that you can view it as the opposite. Just that's what we do. Like, that's now a new purpose of the meat bag. Like, we just make meaning. We're meaning machines.
I know, and I want to say that meaning is baked more into reality than just to the extent that we create it or whatever. with our cognitive
Well, it's
faculties.
a limitation of our biology, right? Like, it's everything that we necessarily experience is cognitive. Like, that's just true.
Right. Hold on. I really gotta go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Maybe I'll play this in the meantime.
Like what you call metaphor, which is this capacity to see analogies between different levels of being, is there everywhere. You can't get around it. And so I would say, once again, like it's to purpose. Like the best way to understand it is to purpose. So if I use the word unlock, and I'm unlocking a door, it's a perfectly useful term to manifest the unlocking of the door. If I use the word unlock to unlock my computer, which is absolutely different, which has nothing to do with opening a door that has, like, I don't know, gold behind it that I have to make sure that nobody can, like, push their way into. The idea that I want to stop people from getting into my computer, it's a perfect analogy. And then saying that I want to unlock someone's heart is a perfect analogy. But the idea that one of them is more real, I don't think that's.
I'm not even making a statement about realness.
I say one of them is more embodied. The one where I'm trying to stop someone from, like, breaking down my door and stealing my stuff.
Okay, I think we're in the weeds on this, so we'll move on to something else.
Yeah, I think I just at the end of the day, like, I think I just disagree with him, because he's just saying that something is more embodied, therefore it's different. But, like, if you're saying embodied, couldn't you just say something's more literal? Therefore, the word literal has meaning. Like,
yeah, I think that's a fair. That's a fine.
He's
response
interchanging
to
the word literal.
Yeah, obviously it's extremely radical to change the word literal from its common understanding and common meaning. But I see the purpose of it ultimately, of that little experiment or thought experiment or belief or whatever it is, as instilling more things with meaning than we are used to doing. And I think more things have meaning than we are used to observing. And I think that's what that little argument or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think people who generally view the world as matter of fact could learn to understand that, like, everything is like for instance, just learning about solipsism means that everything is subject. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. True.
Okay. I wonder if there's anything interesting we can find. I don't really have anything else to go into per se. I'm exposing my algorithm.
I think it would be interesting to look up some anti-theist arguments, like those that are exactly negative.
Yeah, that would be good, actually. That's a good idea. Okay, so what should I look up? Like, why God doesn't exist, or God does not exist?
Why God doesn't exist, because the minute we find someone saying that I'm not convinced that he does exist, it's like,
then
okay,
it's
so
like, all right, we get that, yeah.
You just lied to me. Like,
the open question. Why God does not. This one has 600,000 views. This one looks nicer, but whatever.
This one looks nicer.
Hello and welcome to another The Wonderful Truth video. In this video we will discuss whether or not the existence of a transcendent God is probable. And the reason why I use the word probable is because you can't prove a negative.
Pause. Yeah, pause real quick.
Yeah.
It just immediately said that he can't prove it.
Exactly. I know.
Immediately, like, first of all, he doesn't deal in proof, so.
And then he's gonna go like, "Oh, you can't prove leprechauns," or this.
like what's more probable if I draw like 5 full houses in a row in cards? Like, yeah, it's probable I'm cheating. Did I cheat? Because that can happen.
Probably, yeah.
I probably cheated, but did I cheat?
Probably cheated. Okay, so maybe we need a better video. Let's see if this one does the trick.
God. The all-powerful, all-knowing, invisible being that created the universe, but somehow can't possibly show up.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the open question, where we ask the things you're not supposed to ask. And sometimes
as if it's somehow like radical or out of the norm to question whether God exists in the 21st century.
He was like, this fucker is invisible. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. The invisible. I mean, yeah, makes a bunch of like claims that nobody believes, and then says, I'm a rebel for asking this question that everybody is asking, that there's no repercussion for asking.
You can answer them.
Fair enough.
Question: why doesn't God exist? Now, I know some of you are already typing furiously in the comments, ready to unleash your absolute proof that God is real. But here's a suggestion. maybe don't.
Maybe don't.
Instead, publish it. Win a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, I hear this one
You'd
all
be
the time.
First person in history to finally
You know
solve
what?
the
You know
ultimate
what?
mystery.
Pause.
Yeah.
That's true though. Like, why are you calling
mean,
into the atheist experience where you could be taking the $1 million? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think the problem is it's an inference to the best evidence, and Nobel Prizes are given for scientific proofs, so it's literally not. There is no scientific proof, like I don't think reasonably for a supernatural being. But also, it's like, okay, the Nobel Prize has only been around post-Enlightenment for the last like 150 years or whatever.
I'm not talking about the Nobel Prize. I'm talking about the Templeton Prize, where they'll give you $1 million for proving anything supernatural.
Oh, the Templeton Prize. I'm surprised no one's won that.
Isn't that what the Templeton Prize
I
does?
think so. Yeah, sure. I think I've heard of that. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but that's interesting.
Because, like, dude, I don't care about the Nobel Prize, dude. If I can prove God,
but
I'm
what's
getting that $1
their
million,
like threshold for supernatural? But even that's also not been around that long. So my point was basically like, well, why don't you publish it and win a Nobel Prize? It's like, well, what do you think the entire church tradition is? Like Aquinas would have won a Nobel Prize, like that. You know, like all these people would have.
I don't know if Aquinas would have won a Nobel Prize.
Not
you know
sure.
who would have won a Nobel Prize?
Who's that?
Newton.
Yeah, for sure.
Bro
Again,
won
a
7
theist.
of them.
And I'm sure there are theists who have won Nobel Prizes, so that's also like a little bit of a false.
If I was to believe in an actual prophet, dude, it'd be fucking him.
Yeah.
Bro has bigger feats than raising him from the dead. And he was just like, he invented all of mathematics. Basically, he invented special relativity, like, or not special relativity. Fuck me. Then he would have been God.
Then yeah.
But like, he invented all this shit, right? And then he turned 26. I'm like, okay.
Okay, fair enough.
26, man. Fuck me.
Yeah, a couple people like that.
Yeah. You have like double that. Like you live to 50 now, even with mercury in your veins. Like fuck.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of like Mozart too. Wrote all those symphonies before he was like 16 or whatever.
Or Da Vinci. Like Da Vinci was just like, I'm an artist, but I'm just gonna make shit that I think will work. And then he was proven right like 50 years later, where like the plane worked. Not 50 years later, but like the plane works, and he was just like I thought it would work. Like,
I knew that would work.
like he was more of an artist than he was a mathematician.
Yeah,
was just
right.
Like, I thought in my head that would work.
Yeah.
Like,
that's sort of why I believe in like revelation and stuff like that too, because it's like, and when science fiction writers predict like actual technology that will come, and then the question is, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did we think of the technology because we were inspired by the writers, or did they have some sort of predictive power? Or is there just some kind of law of nature that they were able to tap into that? I don't know. But let's see if this guy has any positive proof for
let's talk.
The non-existence of God.
See, proving God doesn't exist is like proving there's no invisible flying spaghetti monster swirling above your head right now.
So he doesn't.
You can't see it.
Okay, so he doesn't,
Okay.
With new ones. But don't worry. This time it's totally different, right? Let's talk miracles. Those magical little events that defy the laws of nature.
Well,
Except,
questionable,
strangely,
depending on how you
never
define
in a
them.
way that can be verified.
Also
blind
questionable.
See, the lame walk, the toast lands butter side up. Miracles. And yet, never once has a miracle involved, say, regenerating a lost limb. Or parting a sea in front of an iPhone.
Yeah, it also depends. I mean, I guess he's excluding historical and biblical miracles, but even so, it's like you do hear people miraculously going into remission from their cancer, which is pretty damn close to restoring a lost limb.
I don't know if that's equivalent. But
Everywhere we once saw.
I would be interested. I know you don't believe in miracles, but there is a giant book by this guy, Dr. Keener, who investigates like thousands of those types of claims. I guess you could to put it most, conservatively.
Like accounts, yeah.
Accounts of miraculous healings, and my understanding is that his conclusion is that there are such a thing as completely improbable remissions. And
I agree, improbable, but like improbable things happen a lot.
But that is basically the definition of a miracle. It's just an improbability that's high enough that happens.
Well, actually, I would define miracle as something that can't happen. But
well, then that's pretty circular. I mean, then you've argued it out of existence, or you've defined it out of existence.
Well, no, because like something like God could do something like that because he.
Okay, so a good way, the way that I would define it as well, a different way, other than something so improbable, and also as to not defy the laws of nature, is that
I think you think the gods define the laws of nature, though.
Well, so my understanding of how we do physics is based on a closed system. So
based on a closed system.
So like physics works within a closed system, or you could even think of like Newtonian physics works
and that's why
within.
I'd say that God can do it because God is outside.
Because
the system.
he's outside the system. So any instance of God entering into the system with some force.
And that's
from
what I'm
outside
saying. That it's impossible with the evidence that I have. Like if you're saying that like. For instance, we believe in all the laws of physics, but like we don't believe in this thing that is any exception to the laws of physics, which God would be. Then yeah, it's impossible.
Okay.
Or improbable.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
again,
that's
it's
why
like
I define,
that's just
that's why I
defining
define
it.
miracle that way. Something that can't happen. I guess if I was to extrapolate, something that can't happen based on all our knowledge.
Sure. And I would just say something that doesn't happen within a closed system. I guess that's how I would put it.
Saw gods, we now see natural explanations. And guess what? That trend isn't stopping.
Science of the gaps.
Dark matter,
You
consciousness.
said science of the gaps.
Yeah, a very legitimate take that a lot of people have. Well, we don't know what it is, but it can't be God, so it must be science.
Life, yes, there are still mysteries. But betting that God did it is just filling gaps in our knowledge with wishful thinking. And those gaps?
Agreed. That's why God of the gaps arguments are not good, but neither are science of the gaps arguments. So if he's going to say...
I think they're better than God of the gaps arguments.
No, definitely not. Science of the gaps is better than God of the gaps? That makes no sense.
They have a better track record, yeah.
Then you are literally invoking science of the gaps. You're saying...
Oh, I'm not saying that it's good. I'm just saying it's better.
Okay, fair enough. Agree to disagree on that one.
For instance, if the explanation is in history usually the case, when has God ever been usually the case? Right? At least they've got that going for them.
From my view, for all of history, but anyway. Okay.
I mean, sure.
Yeah. It just depends on where you want to start. And I understand we have very different starting points. So, Jackson, have you watched any non-stamp collector videos? Not particular argumentation, but it is funny AF. Yeah, I'll watch one of those. Let's try to find one more video and see if anybody can present any positive case for God not existing. Is this likely to be? God doesn't exist, now grow up. 22 reasons to stop believing in God. Do you think this will present any positive case?
No. Probably not.
Probably not. I personally have not heard one, so I don't know what they even would be. But
so I'll try and present one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go for it. Or this says disproving the existence of God. Do you want to watch this first, or?
Ooh, that one's good. Okay, go on.
Let's try that.
Do I know for a fact that there is no God?
Oh my God.
No. I'm gonna say that. And I know that's gonna upset some.
Okay. All right. You do your best. Whatever you can come up with, we'll try that.
Sure.
And then maybe we'll watch this non-stamp collector.
Sure. I see no evidence. So I don't think that perfection can exist as a concept.
Okay. I don't think that perfection can exist as a concept. Okay. Yeah.
I don't think perfection exists.
And why is that? And define perfection, please.
What's it called? The full
actuality
realization. Full actuality of all positive traits.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Well, I think you'd have to say positive traits, otherwise he's all sin.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I think
so
potentiality only applies to things that are like sin is a negation. It's not like a thing that has potential.
Evil, right?
I guess I actually don't think so. Yeah. I'm not sure. Okay, but anyway, I'll accept your definition of perfection. So, like, basically, the full actuality of like the good traits. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so why can't that happen?
Because I think the full actualization of positive traits contradict each other.
Okay, explain that.
You can't be infinitely just and infinitely merciful. They are contradictory statements.
Oh, I disagree with that. I think if you were infinitely just, you would be infinitely merciful.
Well, no, because you'd have to be just. The punishment must fit the crime. Mercy is definitely the negation of fitting the crime. It's actually grace. It's literally saying that we are not going to be just. Well, that's why it's merciful.
But perfect, like perfect justice. Well, again, I don't know if it's proper to say that it's like infinite mercy and infinite just or whatever, justice.
Well, I just don't think that you can be just and merciful at the same time. Like, I just can't do that.
But that flies in the face of what we understand to be justice.
No, it doesn't, because literally it's the punishment fitting the crime. Mercy is.
But that's not just. That's just eye for
mad.
an eye. That's not really justice, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so your proof that God does not exist is that no perfect being can exist. Because
no perfect being can exist because there are multiple traits that contradict each other if taken to their fullest extent, while also being positive traits. Because I think you would agree that justice and someone being just is a positive trait.
Yeah.
But being merciful is also a positive trait.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
think those can be maximally true at the same time.
I think they most definitely can be, because we have a lot of times our court system is both just and merciful. Obviously not maximally, but clearly those things don't contradict each other.
But how are they just and merciful? Because just is literally being merciful is literally the negation of just.
But justice is it's not about like equal outcomes. It's about like.
Well, it's what's based on what's morally right and fair.
Yeah,
but
right.
Mercy is literally not being fair. It's being
being fair.
It's being graceful. No, you can be merciful and have it. You can't have it be merciful and have it be fair.
You cannot have something be merciful like you cannot have it be merciful and fair. That doesn't seem. I don't understand that.
Well, because mercy is literally you not choosing to punish a person based on what they've done.
Well, or choosing to lessen their punishment, but yeah.
Or choosing to lessen their punishment. Yeah, correct. So like it's literally not being fair, because lessening the punishment would mean, because I think you.
But who is it not being fair to?
Just things.
Who is it not being fair
to?
to?
Anyone you want.
No, but like in this case, like so.
Anyone you want.
What do you mean anyone? No, but I'm asking you.
Ever.
It's not fair. But who is it not fair to be merciful and just to someone? I don't understand.
Oh no! I'm saying you can't be fair and merciful, like, because just is like the part of just is fairness.
Okay.
Like those two things contradict each other, because mercy is the suspension of justice.
Okay.
Like, for instance, if someone deserves to die, but I'm like, no,
I don't think mercy is a suspension of justice.
Merciful.
I think you could still give a just sentence that is a merciful sentence. Like, I think that happens a lot, actually.
Okay, name a fair thing that is also merciful. Because to be merciful, it needs to be the suspension of something that was supposed to happen.
How about this? A young child steals a loaf of bread from a bakery to feed his starving family. The judge brings in the child for thievery and gives him a slap on the wrist because he understands why the child stole the loaf of bread and that the baker, whatever, is going to be fine. That would be both just and fair. I mean, just and merciful.
No, it wouldn't, because it wouldn't have been just to punish him.
Yeah, but he did punish him. So he gives him a slap on the wrist, like maybe a night in jail or whatever is right.
I'm saying it wouldn't have been just to punish him further.
That's what I'm saying too. But there was justice and there was mercy, right?
But there wasn't mercy because you were fair.
Okay, if you're defining mercy as unfair, then I think you're right. But then that wouldn't be a part of the perfect God.
Mercy is giving someone lesser punishment than they deserve.
No, not than they deserve.
Okay.
Mercy is giving them. Mercy is taking into account all the factors in order to give someone the most just punishment. Mercy is part of proper justice.
Okay, so.
But that's how we see it. I mean, what is your problem? What is your problem with
what mercy means?
Yeah, I mean, you're defining mercy as unfairness, and I agree that a perfect being could not be unfair and just. So I agree with you on that. So if that's how you want to define mercy, then that's fine. But that's not how we normally define mercy in any way. And if that is how you define mercy, then that's not a good trait.
Well, hold on, because I think it would be a good trait because God has compassion. However,
I agree.
The other thing that you say, did we deserve Jesus?
No.
We didn't?
No.
It wouldn't have been fair?
What wouldn't have been?
It wasn't fair, in fact.
If we had never been... Wait, what wouldn't have been fair? Like, Jesus' sacrifice?
We don't deserve... Yeah, Jesus' sacrifice wasn't fair to God.
Jesus' sacrifice...
It wasn't just, and it wasn't... Like, okay.
I'm not sure I understand.
We didn't deserve God to sacrifice himself, right? We just didn't deserve that. It wasn't fair.
Fair and deserve are kind of two different things, but...
I get like the same thing. You get what you deserve. It's fair.
Okay. Sure. It's not fair. Yeah, I guess. It's not fair to God.
So God can do things that aren't just and fair.
Well, he can do them to himself, but he's not violating any justice or whatever.
He is, because it's not just to do that to him.
But if he decides what's like, okay, so for instance, is it fair if I give up my food that I bought at Wingstop to the homeless guy on the corner? Is that fair to me?
Not sure. I don't know everything.
Okay, then I guess I'll answer the same to you then on the Jesus point.
That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm asking similar. Like that's why I'm asking easy fairness questions, because we're not God.
This is much easier than the one you asked me. Is it fair to God for him to send himself as his son to take on the sins of the world? Like, that's an extremely hard question.
I'm specifically asked, did we deserve God?
Okay.
Like, did we deserve?
Did the homeless guy deserve my chicken?
I don't know. There's not a whole book written about the homeless guy.
But you don't want to engage in this thought experiment at all, is what's happening, or no?
No, I literally just don't know.
I'm just trying to show you how you can be fair and merciful and just all at once. And even if you give something of yours away, especially if you give someone something of your own away, such as like dying or something, in the case of God. But you're somehow saying that it's unfair to God for him to give his chicken wing to the homeless guy. I don't see how that's the case.
It's not unfair to God, right? And I mean,
then who is it unfair to? Who is it unfair? Okay.
It might be, right?
Who is it unfair to? To us?
I think you would have to agree that we don't deserve. I think it would be unfair to us because it would be two mutual things, right? You can be unfair in the opposite direction, right? You can get more than you would have bargained for and still be unfair.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's like too good. So it's too good for us.
Too good or too bad, in other directions, right? So it's unfair in some way because it's undeserved, right?
Okay.
So he is being merciful by sending Jesus, his own son, right?
Yeah, exactly. Graceful, merciful,
right. So mercy is opposed to justice. It's the suspension of justice.
It's ultimately you have to have mercy to meet proper justice.
Not true. What?
I mean, I think you do. I don't think eye for an eye is just.
Deserve.
I don't think that's just. Eye for an eye. I don't think that's just.
Hold on. Hold on.
Yeah. I think we might be talking past each other, but real human beings in the chat. Oh, we got Jackson in the. We can invite Jackson to speak if you'd like. Yeah, we might be talking past each other, but I don't define mercy as unfairness. I define mercy as a necessary...
Well, it's a suspension of necessary punishment. Like, that's the thing, is that being merciful means that you are actively you're actively not giving you the punishment that you deserve. That's the whole point of atonement in the Bible, is that God's ultimate form of mercy is not giving the humans what they deserve.
Giving us more than we deserve.
Giving them more than they deserve, right? So it's a suspension of getting what is fair. It's a suspension of being fair, which is justice. Which means that mercy, the thing he did, is opposed to justice.
ChatGPT also thinks that mercy and justice are not mutually exclusive. In a deeper sense, they can complement each other, especially within a theistic framework. Here's why. Defining justice and mercy. I think you'll agree with the definition. Justice, giving people what they deserve. Reward for good, punishment for evil. Mercy, withholding deserved punishment or showing compassion, right? Okay, fair enough.
Withholding punishment, yeah.
Withholding deserved punishment even, which is, I think, strengthens your point. Yeah. So
it's literally saying withholding the previous thing.
Justice and mercy in action. A judge can pardon a criminal, mercy, while ensuring that justice is upheld by requiring restitution or having someone else pay the penalty. I mean, that's weird. I would use my bread example. I would use my bread example.
There's a difference in how we're using the words here, because justice being served is like a saying. It's not like a thing that's being actively done.
I think justice can be served.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is that, let's say there's a gradient of punishments, right?
Yeah.
One notch on the gradient is the fair, just, deserved punishment, right?
Yeah.
If you're saying justice has been served in a court of law, you have no fucking clue if you've met that specific notch.
No, you
Should
don't.
He be in jail for 70 years, for 20 years?
Right.
God would know. Yeah.
God would know. Okay, so a parent, this is another good example. A parent can discipline a child, justice, while showing love and patience, mercy. So you're saying justice is not, you can't possibly justly mercifully deal with your child.
I think I disagree with the definition of merciful in that example, because it literally doesn't correspond to the
Yeah, you really want to define mercy as like this black and white.
What do you mean?
I mean,
look above, dude.
Withholding deserved punishment or showing compassion. So showing compassion to you is inconsistent with a perfect being. Withholding deserved punishment is, I mean, even deserved punishment, because I do think we deserve the punishment of our sin. But God's mercy is so great. But look, this is how they go.
Deserved punishment goes in the face of justice.
That what?
As defined above.
Withholding deserved punishment, I would say, does not at all go in the face.
It literally does, giving people what they deserve.
Yeah.
And then it says withholding deserved punishment.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Okay. So in Christian theology, God is both just and merciful. This is the important point, because this is supposed to be an argument against Christianity. So justice demands punishment for sin. Mercy desires forgiveness and restoration, right? The resolution is found in the atonement of Christ, where justice, the penalty for sin, is paid, is satisfied through Jesus' sacrifice, allowing mercy to be extended. So in this insane, divine, godly way.
That's perfect. No, that's perfect, because a justice was taken.
Yes.
And then mercy was allowed. Those don't happen at the same time.
They're totally happening at the exact same time. The mercy is the justice. It
says mercy will be allowed after the justice.
But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. So in what
that has to do with what we're talking about, but sure.
They happen at the exact same time. The punishment that brought us peace, the punishment and the peace.
The perfect punishment, or the just punishment, or the deserved punishment. None of those
but that's
words are there that
obviously the implication. I mean, okay, all right. This is not a powerful argument to me, but maybe it's powerful to someone. So
it's literally only one prong. It's literally only two things that are maximally powerful or maximally realized.
And to me, they're totally. To me, they don't contradict each other at all. It's actually completely radical for you to say that mercy and justice contradict each other. I don't think anyone will agree with that, truly, but maybe they will.
Actually, that's a popular reason as to why they can't be both merciful and just in the case of God.
So you would say like restorative justice, like let's do away with that. Judicial discretion, like courts should not have any sort of like mercy. In order to have a maximally just court system, there should not be mercy.
First of all, courts don't have mercy.
Yeah, they do.
Talking about exact justice.
At least in America, they do.
Listen to the second part. When they talk about exact justice, because we have no way of telling exact justice. God does have a way of telling exact justice.
Exactly, which is why he can know to be merciful. If we can't even tell exact justice, but we already know that it's more just to have mercy in certain situations, i.e. the child stealing bread for his starving family, then obviously God is going to know that. I mean, what's the problem here? I don't understand.
Okay, I'm trying to explain.
Okay.
What you're saying is that both can be done at the same time.
Yes.
One is the suspension of the other.
No,
and
it's
the reason not. The reason I say that is because, yes, in a judicial system where we have fallible beings with limited knowledge, we don't know what the perfect justice would be, which means that you could be quote unquote just and also be merciful. Because let's say that your time span for going to jail for a crime could be 10 years or it could be 50 years.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And let's say we pick 10 years.
Yes.
It's like, okay, we're being merciful and just.
Yes.
But those aren't the actual words mean, because we don't know what would be just for a specific scenario. We're not omnipotent.
Gotcha.
We're not omnipresent.
Gotcha.
But God is.
Yes.
So if God knows the exact punishment that we deserve, the exact amount of years we need to serve, the exact amount of pain we need to go through, and then he's merciful.
And then serves them himself.
Suspenseful.
Then he serves those years himself.
What do you mean he serves those years himself? That's unfair to him.
That's the theology. Yeah, but he can't be unfair to himself. So that's why he did it.
That's why he doesn't exist.
I see. Okay, so that's good. This argument has not moved me even remotely on any level, but I want to let you present it
because you think the words are different.
What's that?
That's just because you think the words are different, but they do have the suspenseful of each other.
I know. Okay, so fair enough. I mean, I think I'm not alone in seeing mercy and justice as being like mutually compatible. But fair enough.
I would love to hear your definitions of mercy and justice.
My definition of mercy and justice, I think we can stick pretty much with the same definitions. Justice.
Okay. Why do these not? Why do these not fly in the face of each other?
Good justice is good being rewarded and evil being punished. Okay? Fair enough?
Wait, which one are you using?
That's justice is good gets rewarded. Is it on the
screen you're showing?
Oh, yeah. Can you not see? It's on ChatGPT.
Giving people what they deserve. Oh, you're using the example.
Okay,
that's fine.
Well, just, the implication of giving people what they deserve.
Because
giving people what they deserve means that, like, that's just too rigid to me. Like, that, it seems like there is some necessary quality of what each action deserves or something like that. So
right, like a murder deserves I think God would agree that like a murder deserves a specific amount of time in jail type shit.
Right.
Like it's never like 10 to 20, it's always like 50.
It's like 23 years exactly. I also think that God could very easily take on that punishment himself, put himself in jail for 23 years exactly.
But that would be unfair to him.
But I don't think he could possibly be unfair to himself.
But that would be unfair to him.
No, I just disagree.
Why would it be fair to him?
Because he decides what's fair.
He didn't commit any crime. Okay,
yeah, but
so we're just saying that he decides what the words mean now.
Sure.
I think he decides what justice is, therefore he's all justice because he can make justice whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah, I mean, he literally does define justice and as a function of his nature, of his essence, so he can't go against his own essence. But
so you're saying that God
yes.
is composed of things that God is composed of.
Well, his attributes flow out from his simple essence, and his attributes have many different qualities.
And him being all merciful doesn't mean anything because he can arbitrarily decide what they mean.
On the level of like divine simplicity, they don't mean anything. One level below that, they absolutely have the meanings that they have. So justice.
Okay, but again,
I don't know.
Saying that God can suspend the contradiction.
Okay. So it's not a contradiction, though. I mean, this is so radical to me that you think that you can't have perfect justice and perfect mercy.
You can't because perfect mercy is a suspension of justice.
Because you're defining mercy. So God doesn't define mercy.
Shit. I defined it originally, and then this motherfucker fucking I described it the same way.
Yeah. Except no. Okay. Withholding deserved punishment or showing compassion, but you're just disregarding the showing compassion part.
I mean, the whole showing compassion thing, I would imagine, would be a lessening of deserved punishment, right? Would you say that we didn't deserve Jesus, but Jesus was being compassionate by sacrificing himself, for instance?
Yes.
Right, there you go.
So that's merciful to me.
I agree.
Okay, so that's mercy. So it's not this simple deserved punishment. It's not this simple, like this simplistic, as you want to put it, view of mercy where mercy is definitionally unfair. I just completely disagree with that.
But it is unfair. It's in your favor.
I know you want to define mercy as unfair. I just don't see it that way.
Listen, look up the definition or ask ChatGPT the definitions.
How about Aquinas argues that justice and mercy are not opposed, but rather mercy perfects justice, which is exactly what my intuition is, which is great.
Mercy perfects justice.
Absolutely, that's obvious. In the case of the kid in the case of the kid stealing the bread, what should happen for his starving family? Does mercy perfect justice, or should he be tried as someone that stole a piece of bread and they're fat and full and rich and they did it because they love stealing? I mean, what are you talking about,
now
bro?
You're making a false equivocation.
How so?
That's not who he is. It would be just to do that to the other person, but not to him. They're not the same people. We're not perfect beings. So you're just making a false equivocation.
I'm not sure how so. Please explain how so.
You're literally saying, should he be tried like the rich motherfucker?
Yeah.
No,
because we have mercy. No, but God would also not try him that way.
Ambiguity.
So you think
because he's not because he's merciful, but because he knows that they're not the same.
Oh, this is so difficult. Okay, I don't think this is a powerful argument. I think you should definitely flesh it out and make a nice video about it and see, because they're clearly you could fill a really good.
I mean, you can look up a video with it if you
want. Okay, yeah, I mean, does mercy contradict justice? What do you want, a Jordan Peterson video?
There it is, the metal hunting Jordan Peterson.
Is that what this is? Or no?
Oh, no, wait, no, that's mercy. No, never mind. That's Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
I know there was a bit about it from Matt Delonte, but I don't remember what the fuck that video is.
Okay, so...
If you want to just find a video that isn't a short,
yeah.
I know there are videos on it. God forgive without punishment. I mean, no, because Jesus was punished. So.
Right. I'm not sure what kind of... These are all, like... Interestingly, these are all Christian videos.
Yeah, that's funny, actually. I mean, I guess look up, can God be all just and all merciful?
Sure.
I remember seeing a lot of videos like this when I was like 16, but I guess they've been buried. There we go.
This could be good.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Pondering Christianity. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, and without further ado, let's dive in. Can God be both just and merciful? This question appears like a natural and easy way to defeat God in a battle of logic. Pause.
Okay. Yeah.
He already knows that it's fucking intuitive, so I don't want any, like, oh, you just defined it this way. Like, people view this shit as intuitive, so go ahead.
I understand. I still hold by my original position and think that it is a reclassification of mercy to mean unfair, but fair enough.
Brother. It's not a reclassification. People know that this is the intuitive way.
Okay, I agree. I mean, that's why there's tons of videos about it. That's fair. To me, it's not intuitive. I admit that I am wrong.
That shit up. That's what I'm saying.
I know you're not making shit up. I didn't mean to offend you or come at you or say that you're
I'm smiling.
playing.
I'm smiling. I'm not offended.
Okay.
I'm literally just like, I'm not crazy. Like, there's no fucking way.
No, you're right. You're not crazy. This is a very natural and intuitive argumentation. I'd never heard it before, and that's why I didn't find it intuitive, so that's why I also whatever, but okay.
No, I thought it was crazy for a bit because none of the videos that I thought would pop up popped up, and I was like, no fucking way. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way.
Yeah. Okay, let's see how
Mercy
this plays
is
out.
the suspension of justice, meaning justice won't be carried out. Envision a criminal standing on trial for a great crime,
right?
And the judge gets up to the stand and announces, this person is forgiven for all their crimes. Now, that would be awesome for the criminal who has committed the crimes to be freed from their prosecution.
Right.
However, the victims of the criminal's acts may have a contrary opinion.
Oh, I know where this goes.
The victims would claim that it isn't...
Well, I don't want to... We'll see how this goes, but argumentation line I can see is that the victim of sin is God himself. So it's up to him to give up that... so it would be fair to him to give that up because he's the only victim. And so if he doesn't feel victimized by it, by doing the sacrifice that he does, then it's fair to him again. But anyway, let's continue and see what this is.
But it would be a punishment, and it would be for the person that doesn't deserve the punishment. And the person that does deserve the punishment is not getting it. So it's still unjust.
Right, but it could... Well, it's
fair that the criminal is receiving
just,
mercy, as of course, it isn't justice. This occurrence points to a greater source of authority that the person in this example is appealing to. Therefore, you can't be both just and merciful. Or can you? Let's look at this quickly from two angles. Firstly, how God can do both. You see, with sin, which is a crime against good, and ultimately God, as he's the authority of what is good, God personifies all the characteristics of goodness, mercy, and justice, ironically making the list together. That said, we still have this paradox of how to be both just and merciful. Simply put, we sin, God forgives, but not without someone paying the penalty for this sin. Enter in Jesus, God the Son. Now, I understand the Trinity is a mind-bending thought, and for the sake of time, I'm going to take the liberty here to just say that Jesus is in fact God. That said, God, in the form of Jesus, steps in place to take the just punishment for our sins as Jesus, which in turn rewards us with God's mercy. Jesus ultimately becomes the bridge through his sacrifice, which allows both justice and mercy to be satisfied in the eyes of God. Now, the second part, a strong objection I held as an atheist, was, and this comes as an obvious observation, but to be crass, why God requires death, and namely his own son's death. Couldn't he have simply just changed the rules? He is the author of all the known universe, is he not? Wouldn't it simply be in his power? Well, no, he couldn't change the rules on this one. Remember earlier the part about me mentioning God's nature? God is the ultimate standard and authority of what is good. and namely in this instance, what is both justice and mercy. If he were to alter the rules to say just simply forgive with no penalty, he is simply merciful, however, he is not just, as wrong goes unpunished. Now, before you decide that's a reality you want to live in, why don't you ask yourself the question, do you wish to live in a world where all sin, all wrong, is not held or pursued by justice? We like the good guys because they always, or at least the majority of the time, win. They beat up the bad guys in the name of justice. There are justice systems all over the world that work hard to maintain a balance between the good done in society and the bad, albeit with many warranted critiques. That said, I think it's safe to say that society would like to keep justice. How about the other direction of no mercy? This would mean God could choose to have no mercy and simply uphold the justice attribute of good, which means sin everywhere would be purged. Yeah, I don't think anyone would like that option either. Also, this would leave the mercy aspect.
You would like that option?
Where, yeah, all sin was forgiven and never happened? Yeah, I do that.
No, not forgiven, purged. Because it's not, this is if we do away with mercy, as in we all receive the proper punishment for our sin, which would be death.
Would it be on the continue? No, it would be like that no sin was there.
If there were,
like
maybe.
Of sin, not purged human beings.
Yeah, then that becomes just a totally different conversation. But yeah, that would be the question.
I guess we become robots in your view, but like I don't think we all die.
Yeah, I think we would have to be we couldn't have been agents.
I mean, in your view.
In my view, yeah. Well, in the traditional Christian view. But,
I still think we can choose between good things, but...
Maybe.
Aspect of God's nature also wanting. Finally, the argument could be made why God couldn't simply just make this one exception. You know, just forgive the world of all of its sin just
That's
this
what you're
once.
kind of talking about.
Please. Another valid point.
Or just if there were
However,
no sin.
the answer is this. God is perfect. Perfection allows no exceptions. One blunder defeats perfection. A very difficult standard to uphold, however, God does it, and rightfully so. He would be a disappointing God, honestly, if he wasn't perfect. Thus, he requires that justice and mercy are both fully satisfied, which ultimately lends itself to the beauty of Jesus. I would urge you greatly to consider accepting Jesus' gift of standing in your place for sin.
Right. So I guess that I became a little too heated. I didn't see the intuitiveness of this argument, and I apologize for that. It is intuitive. I do understand that there is a tension at the very least. I'm not going to say it's an outright contradiction still, but a tension between justice and mercy. And I'm going to agree with Aquinas that mercy does perfect justice. And I'm going to agree with our video guy here that the only way to bridge the gap between them probably was this sacrifice of Jesus.
Yeah, see, my main thing about this is that, sure, let's say that God changes the rules so that he is able to take someone else's. Also, Sean wants to speak, so hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Someone takes on...
What's up, Sean?
So that someone else takes on the punishment, and the punishment is given, right?
Yeah.
The punishment is given. Sure, that solved one prong of the problem. However, the punishment isn't the only thing that's the problem in being fair. The punishment needs to be given to the person who deserves it. Jesus, while not deserving it, can change the rules so that he can take it on. That's fine. But the person goes unpunished. The person who deserves it goes unpunished.
Humanity
that's just a fact,
deserves
whether or
it.
not he changes that.
But that's why it's important, the typology of Adam and Jesus. So Adam is essentially the one who deserves it. Adam and Eve, you might say. And we almost don't deserve it because we just...
I'd say the devil technically deserves it ultimately. Right?
Yeah, and then the devil definitely does seem to get his punishment. It's some sort of eternal hellfire, deletion from existence or whatever. But Adam really is the one who deserves it, and Jesus is the new Adam. Adam is a typology of Jesus. So that's why Jesus becomes our brother. To be the person that can take on, that does deserve the punishment. That's part of the religion. But
Hey,
I understand the tension. Yeah, what's up, Sean? What do you think? What's up, Sean?
This reminds me of
Oh, yeah.
the Cor Deus Homo.
Okay. Oh yeah, or yeah, right. There's people were talking about that recently. Cor Deus Homo by Anselm. I like Anselm. He's a cool guy. Well, what part does this remind you of? Anselm came up with the ontological argument, interestingly.
Yes.
How man cannot be saved without satisfaction for sin?
Yeah.
Is that it? Chapter, wait, let's see. That'll be page 40. Page 40. The pages, yeah, they do.
Oh, actually, Sean, I want to ask you this. So, because I, again, don't want to feel crazy. You, like, initially, right, if I was to tell you the definitions of, like, mercy or justice, would you think that mercy is a suspension of justice?
It's not a suspension of justice. It's a suspension of... Actually, I have Aquinas here.
Of course you fucking
do. I know. I can always count on Sean. I can always count on Sean. You're not crazy. You're definitely not. You're definitely not great. I mean, you know this, but you're definitely not crazy, Infamous. I do understand. I was being a little heated. To me, maybe because as a reflection of my own blinders,
I don't blame it on you.
It was unintuitive. But yeah.
I just don't want to blame it on you or anything. I'm just saying, like, I was like, there's no way. Like, there's not a fucking...
No, it is intuitive. I do see the tension, especially when we get the definitions like this. But then just in practice, to me, it's not intuitive. Like, because of
like, we have a pattern here, because, like, I said it, ChatGPT said it, and then a YouTuber said it. Like, there's no way.
Yeah. No, I get the tension, for sure.
But yeah, my main issue would just be that there's two prongs of justice. Is that, one, the punishment is given to the person that deserves it, which he's taking the prong of. But then, if he does that, justice is not served.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I it's not clear to me that because God is also the offended party, that it wouldn't be just for him to just do it this way. But I see
because it excludes him just forgiving people, and if that's the exclusion, then that means justice has to be done, and if justice isn't done, then that's clearly a problem, because otherwise he can just forgive people.
Then he wouldn't
be
that. Yeah.
And so if he takes for instance, if I take the blame for
like your brother murdering someone or something.
Yeah, justice goes unserved.
Right, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Right, so just because Jesus did it, I don't see any way other than, like, magic.
Yeah, it might be a little bit magical, it might be something like that, but also I think it's important to see Jesus as he's the representative for all of humanity. Like, he is humanity, is the point, is the theology.
By the way,
but he's not punished accordingly. That's the thing. He becomes a god in 3 days.
Well, his punishment was
pretty
aggressive.
I have a really long... Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I have a really long reading list for you.
Oh, yeah? I probably need it.
Yeah.
Send it over.
For me, I'm a video listener.
Yeah. Send it to me, Sean, either in the general chat or you can, like, direct message me. That'd be sick.
Don't direct message him. He doesn't watch his direct message.
I don't. That is also important, but I will if I know something's coming. I very rarely.
I asked him if he deleted the server halfway through the week. And he was like,
I did see that, and I never responded. And then you figured it out yourself, and I felt bad that I never responded.
Because I was like, wait a minute, where the fuck is the server?
Where's the server? Yeah, I just changed it to have like a cooler image, but Can you think that man who has sinned and Anselm is so cool. I don't know. Like he gives me this sort of like
just a Chad.
Plato, Socrates like dynamic. I don't know. So how man cannot be saved without satisfaction for sin. It was fitting for God, Anselm says, it was fitting for God to fill the places of the fallen angels from among men. Bozo just goes, that is certain. I love Bozo just goes, yep, that is for sure. Even though that's not, that's so unintuitive to me. But
he literally did the fucking medieval version of for sure.
Yeah, for sure, dude, for sure. And then Anselm goes, therefore there ought to be in the heavenly empire as many men taken as substitutes for the angels as would correspond with the number whose place they shall take. That is, as many as there are good angels now, Otherwise they who fell will not be restored, and it will follow that God either could not accomplish the good which he begun, or he will repent of having undertaken it, either of which is absurd. I mean,
yeah, I think the idea that God can repent for anything is absurd.
Yeah. It truly is fitting that men should be equal with good angels. Have good angels ever sinned? No. Can you think that man who has sinned and never made satisfaction to God for his sin, but has only been suffered to go unpunished, may become the equal of an angel who has never sinned? Bozo. These words I can both think of and utter, but can no more perceive their meaning than I can make truth out of falsehood. That's interesting.
Yo, bro, he's fucking spitting.
He's spitting, dude. Both of these guys are spitting. And someone goes,
the fucking medieval version of a fucking rap battle.
It is like a rap battle. And someone goes, therefore it is not fitting that God should take sinful man without an atonement in substitution for lost angels. For truth will not suffer man thus to be raised to an equality with holy beings. Reason shows this, bozo.
Yeah, they will not be suffered, fucker.
Yeah. Consider also, leaving out the question of equality with the angels, whether God ought, under such circumstances, to raise man to the same or a similar kind of happiness as that which he had before he sinned. Tell your opinion, says Bozo, and I will attend to it as well as I can. I love these two. These two are hilarious. They're
Give
awesome.
me your opinion and I shall tend to it.
As well as I can. These two are awesome.
Give me your opinion and I'll deal with it.
Suppose a rich man possessed a choice pearl, which had never been defiled, and which could not be taken from his hands without his permission, and that he determined to commit it to the treasury of his most dearest and most valuable possessions. I accept your supposition, says Bozo. It's like, that's so fun. It's so formal. It's hilarious. What if he should allow it to be struck from his hand and cast in the mire, though he might have prevented it, and afterwards, taking it all soiled by the mire and unwashed, should commit it again to his beautiful and loved casket? Will you consider him a wise man? Bozo. How can I? For would it not be far better to keep and preserve his pearl pure than to have it polluted? Ansem. Would not God be acting like this, who held men in paradise, as it were in his own hand, without sin, and destined to the society of angels, and allowed the devil, inflamed with envy, to cast him into the mire of sin, though truly with man's consent? For had God chosen to restrain the devil could not have tempted man. Now, I say, would not God be acting like this, should he restore man, stained with the defilement of sin, unwashed, that is, without any satisfaction, and always to remain so, should he restore him at once to paradise, from which he had been thrust out? Yeah, so you're saying, because it seems like Anselm is making God the author of evil, by saying he could have restrained the devil.
No. What he's saying is that God has power over the devil because... He's saying the devil has power over God because God had... So he's saying the devil has power over man. God is man. Therefore, the devil has power over God, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, no. That's... I think he's going to set that up as ridiculous, but actually, to be clear, he's not... He's still saying God has has power over the devil, but that because God has power over the devil... God could have chosen to restrain the devil.
Right, but God chose, he's saying God chose to let the devil have control over it, which is fucked up. It still kind of doesn't make any sense.
Right. That's what I thought you were going to pick up on. So yeah, it's not that the devil has power over God. It's that in this analogy that he's setting up so far, God chose not to restrain the devil in the same way that the rich man chose to drop the pearl into the mud. Okay, so...
Right, but at the end of the day, the pearl is still muddy.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Bozo, I dare not deny the aptness of your comparison were God to do this, and therefore do not admit that he can do this. For it should seem either that he could not accomplish what he designed, or else that he repented of his good intent, neither of which things is possible with God. Anselm. Therefore, consider it settled that, without satisfaction, that is, without voluntary payment of the debt. Yeah, I love it. God can neither pass by the sin unpunished, nor can the sinner attain that happiness, or happiness like that, which he had before he sinned, For man cannot in this way be restored or become such as he was before he sinned, which I think essentially is he's saying like, therefore consider so that without satisfaction, that is without voluntary payment of the debt, God can neither pass by.
He's basically saying that because God paid the debt, humanity will not be restored to the level they were at before the fall.
Right. For man cannot in this way be restored or become as such. Yeah,
Therefore, the debt hasn't been paid, because when the debt is paid, they will go to where they were before that. So if the debt hasn't been paid, justice hasn't happened.
Okay, so then Pageau is concerned about.
Point.
Yeah, Pageau is concerned about this. He goes, "I am wholly unable to refute your reasoning." At least he admits that. But what say you to this? That we pray God put away our sins from us, and every nation prays the God of its faith to put away its sins. For if we pay our debt, why do we pray God to put it away? Is not God unjust to demand what has already been paid? But if we do not make payment, why do we supplicate in vain that he will do what he cannot do because it is unbecoming? And Anselm says, he who does not pay says in vain, pardon. But he who pays makes supplication, because prayer is properly connected with the payment. For God owes no man anything, but every creature owes God. And therefore,
that's what I'm saying. So like he can't pay it. Yeah.
Like man cannot pay this sin.
Well, no, he's saying that man has to pay the sin.
Oh, man has to pay
this.
Right.
But God pays it instead, which makes no sense because God doesn't owe anyone anything.
Right. And I think that's Anselm's kind of agreeing. That is what Anselm's saying, right? And therefore, it does not become man to treat with God as with an equal, right? Like treating God like an equal.
Right. So if God pays the sum, then it doesn't make any sense because they're not equals. Yeah.
Right. But of this it is not now needful for me to answer you. For when you think why Christ died, I think you will see yourself the answer to your question. Pageau, your reply with regard to this matter suffices me for the present. And moreover, you have so clearly shown that no man can attain happiness in sin or be freed from sin without satisfaction for the trespass, that even were I so disposed, I could not doubt it. That satisfaction ought to be proportionate to guilt, and that man is of himself unable to accomplish this. Neither, I think, will you doubt this, that satisfaction should be proportionate to guilt. Otherwise, sin would remain in a manner exempt from control, which cannot be, for God leaves nothing uncontrolled in his kingdom. But this is determined, that even the smallest unfitness is impossible with God. Tell me then, what payment you make God for your sin? Pageau, repentance, a broken and contrite heart, self-denial, various bodily sufferings, pity in giving.
I just love that, like, he was like, I'm done with you for now. And he's like, no.
Yeah. He's like, please, can we stop?
I'm satisfied. Well, I'm not.
So he does all these things, and then Anselm goes, what do you give to God in all these? Pageau, do I not honor God when for his love and fear and heartfelt contrition I give up worldly joy and despise amid abstinence and toils the delights and ease of this life and submit obediently to him, freely bestowing my possessions and giving to and releasing others? When you render anything to God which you owe him, irrespective of your past sin, you should not reckon this as debt which you owe for sin, but you owe God every one of these things which you have mentioned. For in this mortal state there should be such love and such desire of attaining the true end of your being, which is the meaning of prayer, and such grief that you have not yet reached this object, and such fear lest you fail of it, that you should find joy in nothing which does not help you or give encouragement of your success. For you do not deserve to have a thing which you do not love and desire for its own sake, and the want of which at present, together with the great danger of never getting it, causes you no grief. This also requires one to avoid ease and worldly pleasures, such as seduce the mind from real rest and pleasure, except so far as you think suffices for the accomplishment of that object. So it's a lot of that, which I think is beautiful. I agree with, but I could see becoming nature herself teach you to do to your fellow servant man to man as you would have be done by, and that he who will not bestow what he has ought not to receive what he has not. Of forgiveness.
By the way, this is a little bit of evidence towards your view of slavery in the past. So if you want to use this, just screenshot that.
Oh, good point. I will screenshot that.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the evidence against slavery in the past that we are nobody's good?
He says literally like treat your servant as you would yourself. It's the golden rule.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah.
Definitely.
It's evidence. I don't believe it, but it's evidence.
Yeah.
These aren't like normal people. These are like enlightened thinkers. So.
Exactly. And
But
slavery is also obviously still rampant at this time, but the church is already realizing the really smart people in the church are already realizing. Okay. Ooh, okay.
Yeah, just a little bit of evidence that I don't particularly want to just fucking dunk on you when I can.
Yeah. I appreciate that. To your fellow servant, man, as you would be done by, and that he will know. I speak briefly as we said above. Vengeance in no sense belongs to you, since you are not your own, nor is he who injures you yours or his, but you are both the servants of one Lord, made by him out of nothing. And if you avenge yourself upon your fellow servant, you proudly assume judgment over him when it is the peculiar right of God, the judge of all. But what do you give to God by your obedience, which is not owed him already, since he demands from you all that you are and have and can become? Might as well finish it up. But truly I dare not say that in all these things I pay any portion of my debt to God. How then do you pay God for your transgression? If in justice I owe God myself and all my powers, even when I do not sin, I have nothing left to render to him for my sin. What will become of you then? How will you be saved? Merely looking at your arguments, I see no way of escape. But turning to my belief, I hope through Christian faith, which works by love, that I may be saved.
Oh shit, dude, he made a comeback. He made a fucking comeback.
Boso really stepped up. He stepped up. And the more, since we read that if the sinner turns from his iniquity and does what is right, all his transgressions shall be forgotten. And so this is only said of those who either looked for Christ before his coming or who believe in him since he has appeared. But we set aside Christ and his religion as if they did not exist, when we proposed to inquire whether his coming were necessary to man's salvation. We did so. Let us then proceed by reason simply. Though you bring me into straits, yet I very much wish you to proceed as you have begun. Boso. These two are awesome, dude. I would watch a whole movie about these two, just like...
Dude, this is great.
They're awesome.
Sean, thank you for this.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that.
This is like what is it, smash poetry or something?
Yeah,
what is it?
Slam poetry. Slam poetry, yeah. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to read through a lot more of that. That's so cool.
Though you piss me off, I can't deny.
Yeah, I love he's like, though you bring me into straits, I beg you to proceed.
The next time Henry gets on here, dude, and he recommends some Gigolo video, I'm going to be like, you bring me into straits, dude.
Henry, you bring me into straits, yet I will watch this Juggalo video.
Yet I will watch the Juggalo
Try to understand. I got roasted by someone in the comments of that VOD. I was like, first of all, I can't believe people are even watching the whole, like, the VOD. But
watching the whole VOD?
I know. He got to the end of the VOD, and he was like, you're a heathen by saying that Jesus would love these juggalos. I'm like, hey, whoa, hey, what the hell?
He was a juggalo, second of all.
Yeah, I was like, geez, man, chill. Like, we're on the same side here. Like, he's supposed to be a Christian guy, right? But sometimes,
also,
I disagree with those people just as much as the ardent atheists that are like, that fundamentalist, like, crazy about it sometimes.
Also, mad is in the name, so.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that's super cool. I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. And that was a fun stream. Good stuff. Thank you, Sean, for that. I'm gonna read some of that in my own time as well. Boso and Anselm, they're like frickin' frack. It's pretty
so
funny.
Frickin' frack.
The smartest versions of frickin' frack of all time.
By the way, Bosso was a real person.
Was he? Okay, Boso, yeah.
Oh, I thought he was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was a real person. I also prefer calling him Bozo.
Bozo is a little funnier, yeah. Boso, okay, yeah.
I love how he stepped up at the end. He was just like, I don't want to engage in this anymore. And he was like, you know what?
Was this kind of like a Plato-Socrates thing where Boso is the one writing all this and he just like followed Anselm around, or is this Anselm?
I'm pretty sure it's a letter. It's a letter.
Oh, are these
right? They never actually met up.
Are these letters? What's the understanding, Sean, about these two? If you know it.
Well, I think Anselm wrote it completely on his own.
Okay.
And he just asked Bosso permission for his name.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He ChatGPT'd.
He ChatGPT'd Bosso.
Amazing.
Wait, here, there's a preface. The first part of this book was copied without my knowledge before the work had been completed and revised. I have therefore been obliged to finish it as best I could, more hurriedly, so more briefly than I wished. For had an undisturbed and adequate period been allowed me for publishing it, I should have introduced and subjoined many things about which I have been silent. Oh, that's funny. For as while suffering a great anguish of heart, the origin of reason which are known to God, that at the entreaty of others I began the book in England and finished it when an exile in Capra. That is the other thing. These guys have like the most incredible lives too. Like just casually mentioned that he was an exile in Capra. From the theme on which it was published, I've called it Cur Deus Homo, and I've divided it into 2 short books. The first contains... Okay, so yeah, it seems like it's entirely written by Anselm. Or the first part kind of copied without his knowledge, but probably he wrote it and someone else found it.
It sounds like he's going, this was written without my knowledge, but he's right.
Yeah. Cool. Super cool. All right, guys. Thanks a ton. See